Grit. That was the first thing. Grit between my teeth, in my eyelashes, packed under my tongue like the world had decided to feed me a spoonful of itself while I was asleep. I spat. I opened my eyes. I closed them again immediately because the sun up there was not the sun I grew up under. It was bigger, and it was personally offended by my existence. Second thing, my foot was cold. I looked down and found exactly one slipper, pink, fuzzy, sitting on cracked orange dirt like a tourist who took a very wrong turn. The other slipper was gone. I have never found it. Somewhere in another world, there is a single pink slipper living its best life without me. Third thing, I was in pajamas, cotton ones, the ones with the little strawberries. I had flown back into the country 11 hours earlier. I had eaten instant noodles standing over the sink. I had gone to bed in a rented room that smelled like new paint. And now I was standing in a dead orange wasteland in strawberry pajamas with one slipper, and there was a ring on my finger that had not been there when I lay down. Silver. Plain, warm, which rings are not supposed to be. I tried to take it off. It came off about 2 millimeters and then simply stopped, the way a door stops when there is a wall behind it. Not stuck. Declined. Then a voice started talking out of the air, and it was cheerful, and that was somehow the worst part. It called itself Nova. It said, welcome. It said, congratulations on being selected, which is a word people use when they have chosen you and want you to feel like you won something. It said the land under my feet was called the Mist Continent. It said I was now a participant in a survival game. It said my old life was, and I am quoting, currently unavailable. Currently unavailable, like a website. Then it told me the rules, and it told them in the voice of a flight attendant explaining where the exits are. Rule 1. I could build a shelter anywhere I wanted, and inside my shelter, nothing out here could touch me. It said that twice. In my experience, things that get said twice are the things somebody expects you to forget when it matters. Rule 2. For 72 hours, I had 90% damage immunity. Nova called it a protection period. I started calling it the countdown within about 4 minutes. Rule 3. There was no Rule 3. There was just a number hanging in the air where my face would have been in a mirror. 1,240,000 players in my region. I stood there with one bare foot on hot stone, and did the arithmetic I did not want to do. 1 million people is not a class. It is not a company. It is a city. Somebody had taken a city, put it in pajamas, and poured it out onto a wasteland, and then given us a 3-day head start, which meant somebody had done the math on how long we would last without one. Then the ring did something I had not asked for. It pulled something out of my chest. Not literally. It reached into the space where my belongings would have been, and found the one item that had crossed over with me, and it floated it out into the air in front of my face. My Jade. The little green pendant my parents left, the one I have worn since I was old enough not to swallow it. The air read it out loud. Mysterious pivot. Damaged. Damaged. Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. 22 years of wearing a broken thing around my neck, and nobody thought to mention it. It bound to the ring anyway. And when it bound, the screen offered me a draw. One spin, one innate talent. No takebacks. My hands were shaking so badly I hit the button twice. Swo-ji technique. And the world folded open inside my head. That is the only way I can describe it. 1 second, I was a person standing in dirt. The next second, I could feel 500 meters in every direction, the way you feel your own hand in the dark. The dip where water had run. The shape of a slope I could not see over. A stand of pine to the northeast that the map in my skull labeled Shanmu Forest. And in that forest, glowing like 2 coins at the bottom of a fountain, 2 boxes that nobody had told me about. 1 iron, 1 wood. Then I twisted the ring and looked at what I actually had to work with. Li Na, age 22, stamina 4, life value 10, strength 6, spirit 20, luck 12, stamina 4. I have known houseplants with better numbers than stamina 4. I looked at it for a while and decided that if I was going to be a houseplant, I was going to be the kind that survives being forgotten on a windowsill for a month. I did not earn this. I did not train for this. A rock my mother bought at a temple stall rolled a jackpot for me while I stood there in strawberry pajamas. Then it charged me for it. Because 500 meters sounds enormous until you remember that a continent is a continent. I could see boxes the way a person with a flashlight can see a room. The room is not the house. If a chest was sitting 600 meters away, it may as well have been on the moon, and I would spend the next month walking in careful, overlapping circles like a woman vacuuming a country. And I could not see inside them. Not the shape, not the weight, nothing. Every box was a wrapped present until I had it open in my hands, which meant I could not cheat my way to the good ones. I could only cheat my way to all of them. That was going to have to do. Nova dropped a newbie gift pack at my feet and went away to ruin somebody else's morning. 3 flatbreads, a packet of toast, 2 bottles of water, a portable workbench that folded out of a cube the size of my fist, and a dagger, C-grade, with a handle wrapped in something that was doing an impression of leather. I sat down in the dirt and ate 1 flatbread and thought about crying. Then I did not, because crying takes water, and I had 2 bottles. I got up and walked northwest because there was a stream northwest because the map in my head said so. I found it in 40 minutes. Thin, brown at the edges, moving. Moving is the part that matters. Then I built a house. I used the word house generously. The system called it a thatched hut basic tier, and the system was being kind. It was a box of sticks and dry grass with a hole in one wall for going in, and a floor that was just the ground with delusions. But when I stepped inside it, something changed in the air, a soft click behind my sternum, and I knew, with a certainty I had not asked for and could not explain, that nothing out there could reach me in here. I stood in the middle of my stick box and turned around twice. Then I put my 1 slipper in the corner, like a trophy, and went out to rob a forest. Shanmu Forest was cool and green and smelled like resin, and I was 3 steps inside it when the pressure hit me. I have never felt anything like it before or since, not that first time. It came down through the branches like a hand pressing on the top of my skull. Every muscle below my waist turned to warm rice. Some animal part of me that has never had to speak up before started screaming about a predator. I got my back against a pine and got the dagger up and looked for it. The intent moved. Above me. Directly above me in the branches. And I thought, well, this is how a girl in 1 slipper dies on day 1. Then it fell out of the tree and landed in front of me. It was a rabbit. An orange and white rabbit, roughly the size of a loaf of bread, with a beak. An actual beak, 3-lobed, like somebody had assembled a bird and a rabbit out of the same parts bin. It hit the ground on its side, righted itself, sat down, and looked at me with 2 round black eyes. And the pressure was gone. All of it. The killing intent that had nearly put me on my knees had come out of 1 kilogram of animal that had just fallen out of a tree by accident. I looked at it. It looked at me. Then it tried to hop and did not manage it because it had knocked the wind out of itself on the way down, and it sat there breathing like a small bellows and radiating the aura of a thing that could kill everything in this forest. So here is the fork in the road. It was day 1. I was hungry. I had a knife and a creature that could not run. Instead, I crouched down slowly, put the dagger away, and held out a piece of toast. I want to say this was compassion. It was mostly arithmetic. Anything with that much presence and no ability to use it is not from around here. And things that are not from around here know things. Also, it was very soft looking, and I had been alone for 6 hours. It ate half the slice. It made a noise like a squeaky door. Then it climbed into my lap and would not get off. I named it Pippin, because that was the noise. I carried a warm, confused animal in one arm and dug with the other, and I got the wood chest out from under the pine roots. And then I walked another 200 meters and got the iron one, and it never bit me once. Here's the thing I noticed on the walk back. It took me embarrassingly long. I would stop, stare at apparently nothing, and start digging, and come up with a box. And Pippin would watch me do this with the polite confusion of somebody watching a stranger have a conversation with a lamppost. It could not see them. Not one. Not the box 6 meters away, not the box under its own feet. A creature with an aura that nearly put me on the ground was blind to the exact thing a random human girl could see through solid rock, which meant the boxes were not part of this world at all. Somebody had salted an entire continent with treasure and then poured a city of people on top of it. And the treasure was for us specifically, and the local wildlife had been living on top of it for who knows how long without ever knowing it was there. That was the first time I got properly frightened. Not of dying, of the amount of preparation involved. On the way home, a green snake came out of the grass at my ankle. My body moved before my brain filed the paperwork. Dagger down, twist, done. 4 seconds. Then I threw up behind a rock, quietly, so the rabbit would not think less of me. The screen congratulated me while I was still spitting. Regional achievement, first hunt, and one attribute point I could put anywhere I liked. I put it in strength, not because I wanted to be strong, because I had just learned that the distance between me and dead is about a centimeter of blade travel, and I would like to buy some more centimeters. Then I went back and cut that snake open properly because it had a venom sac, and because some part of my brain that has never done anything useful in a job interview said, "Save that." I saved it. Everything I did for the next month, I did with a jar of something horrible that I had saved on day 1. Before dark, I found a buried chest that I could feel 4 meters down through solid dirt and had no way to reach, so I crafted a shovel out of 2 logs and dug for 50 minutes and came up with the chest and 2 earthworms. The earthworms have never once been useful. I kept them for 11 days. I got home at 10 to 6 with a rabbit asleep on my shoulder, and I opened everything by firelight with my back to the wall of my stick house. Food, mostly, bottled water, bread, 200 grams of something that claimed to be beef, a mirror, which I laughed at, a mattress, which I did not laugh at, which I actually hugged, some seeds, which I put in a corner and forgot about for a week, a C-grade fishing net, 2 axes, 1 C and 1 D, and underneath all of it, folded like a napkin, a blueprint for a mountain bike. Copper, leather, plastic, rubber, none of which existed within 500 meters of me, and all of which the game clearly expected me to go and want. I lay on a mattress on a dirt floor in a house made of sticks and thought about the fact that somewhere out there, somebody had designed this. Then I found the World Channel, and it turned out that when you drop a city into a death game, the very first thing the city does is start talking. It was extraordinary. 1 million people in one text stream at 9 at night. Half of them asking where everybody was. A quarter posting pictures of their huts. A woman called Chen Mei put up a photo of an iron chest with her hands shaking so badly the picture blurred, and about 200 people told her congratulations, and I liked all of them for it. A man called Liu Wei was in there answering questions, and had clearly decided that achievements were going to be his personality. And at the top of the channel, a number, updating, under 900,000. I read it 3 times. 300,000 people in one day, with 90% damage immunity switched on. In the safest 24 hours this world was ever going to give any of us. I sat in the dark, holding a rabbit, and understood exactly what the protection period was for. It was not mercy. It was a free trial. It was the game letting us hold the product before it started charging. So I opened a private line to Liu Wei, because a man who chases achievements has already read all the fine print, and I had a crab-free house full of food, and he was, per his own messages, extremely hungry. He wanted scorpion meat, which I did not have. I offered bread and water instead. Then I threw in the campfire recipe for free, which cost me nothing and made him talk to me like a person instead of a trade window. And then I asked him one question. What happens on day 4? He typed for a long time. The little indicator went on and off 3 times. Then he sent one line. When the protection drops, the beasts stop ignoring your shelter. I said thank you. Then I lay on my mattress in a box of dry grass and started counting hours. I woke up before the sun on day 2 with a plan, which is the first time in my life I can honestly say that. The plan had one line in it. Everything I can reach in 72 hours, I take. I went east because Pippin went east. That animal has a nose on it like a customs dog, and by the second morning I had stopped arguing with it. It hopped. I followed. It stopped and made a noise, and I dug, and there was something there. By 9, I had a wood chest and 80 bundles of dry grass and a very sore back. By 10, Pippin had taken me to a hole in a rock face that smelled like the seafood section of a bad supermarket. I could feel 2 things inside it on my map, big ones, and a lot of boxes behind them. I stood at the mouth of that hole for a while, doing the thing I have done before every single stupid decision since. I asked myself what I had that they did not. I had a knife I could barely use. I had fire. I had 80 bundles of dry grass. The first crab came out sideways when I threw a rock in. It was the size of a dinner plate, and its claws could have taken my hand off at the wrist, and I killed it badly. I stabbed it 4 times in the shell before I found the seam. It got a claw onto my forearm and closed. The immunity ate 90% of that, and it still opened a line I can show you today. I got the blade in behind the eyes, and it stopped. I sat down on a rock and shook for 2 minutes, and then got up because there was a second one in there. For the second one, I did not go in. I piled burning grass at the mouth of the hole and fanned it with my coat. It came out coughing. I killed it while it was blind. There is nothing honorable in that. It worked in 11 seconds instead of 4 minutes, and I have never once lost sleep over it. Then I dug the hole out with a 2-log shovel for an hour and a half, and then the dirt came away. 9 wood chests, 2 iron, 36 pieces of crab meat, a pile of shells and claws that my screen tagged as crafting material. Some crab had been hoarding. Some crab had a retirement plan. I took all of it. I sat in the dirt at the mouth of that hole eating a flatbread and laughing at nothing while a rabbit judged me from a rock. Then Pippin took me somewhere else and stopped being funny. It brought me to the edge of a meadow, and it would not go in. The meadow was beautiful. That was the whole problem. Grass up to my knees, wildflowers, gold light coming through in bars, and standing in the middle of it, a tree hung with fat orange fruit that my screen labeled sunflower fruit. Luck +1 on consumption. Luck. In a game where I open random boxes for a living, and all around the base of that tree, bones. Not scattered, arranged. Ribs and skulls and long leg bones lying in a rough ring, the way plates end up around a person who eats in the same chair every night and never once tidies up. The grass was not grass. My map told me that much and then went quiet. It knew there was something living in that meadow and it could not tell me what. I stood at that tree line for 11 minutes. I know because I checked the clock afterward. And then I did the following, in this order, and I have never been prouder of a piece of thinking in my life. I took out the green snake meat I had left over. I cut it open and packed the venom sac inside it, the one I had saved on day 1 because a useless part of my brain had said, save that. I cut my pajama shirt into strips and lashed a crab shell to each forearm. I threw the meat as far into the meadow as I could and dropped flat on my face. The meadow ate it. The entire floor of that clearing came up at once. A green mat, rising, folding, and in the middle of the mat there was a mouth, and the mouth closed on that meat and then made a sound I do not have a word for. A sound like a wet room being pulled inside out. I ran while it was screaming. I got to the trunk. I got both arms up over my head. I hacked a branch off with 5 fruit still on it and turned to run and discovered that it had recovered a great deal faster than I had budgeted for. It hit me across the ribs and threw me 8 meters. I landed on the crab shells and skidded on my back through the grass, and the immunity took 90% of that, and even 10% of it made my vision go white. And then it stopped. I lay on my back in the dirt outside the tree line, with 5 orange fruits clutched to my chest, and watched a thing the size of a swimming pool thrash at an invisible line and refuse to cross it. It could not leave the meadow. It has never been able to leave the meadow. Every bone in that ring belongs to something that walked in. And I started laughing and could not stop. That is the moment. I have thought about this a lot, and that is genuinely the moment. That is where I stopped being a person that this had happened to and became a person who was doing this. Luck 12 to luck 14 over 2 days, 1 fruit at a time. 2 points is the cap. I found that out by eating a third one and getting nothing, which cost me a fruit and taught me something worth more than a fruit. By the end of day 2, I had upgraded. Thatched hut, advanced tier, 30 square meters, 2 rooms, a door that was a door with a frame that closed. The system gave me a 2nd regional achievement for it, which I thought was generous until I looked at the World Channel and saw how many people were still sleeping under a tarp because they had spent 2 days looking for food instead of building. I roasted crab meat over a real campfire in a house with 2 rooms and ate until I could not, with a bird rabbit against my hip stealing pieces off my plate with the confidence of a landlord. Then I opened 4 iron chests and 9 wood ones, which is the closest thing to a birthday I got that year. Food. Always food in volume. Bottled water, biscuits, an entire chocolate cake in a box that had survived the trip between worlds better than I had. A men's undershirt, size large, which I have never understood. Better axes. A 2nd fishing net. And a recipe. C-grade hard crab shell armor. 8 shells, 10 nails, 3 pieces of leather. I had 8 shells. I had nails. I had no leather at all, and the protection period had about 30 hours left in it. So I went shopping. Liu Wei had leather. I knew he had leather because he had spent the previous evening telling the World Channel about it, because that is who he is. He wanted, and I quote, snacks. I sent him a chocolate cake, 2 bottles of water, and a men's undershirt size large that I was never going to wear. He sent 3 pieces of leather and a message that said, "Are you a real person?" That was the first trade I ever made in this world, and it turns into an entire economy later. I made it because I had counted my crab meat, and then I had counted his hunger, and the second number was the one that mattered. I built the armor that night. It fits the way a barrel fits a person. I put it on and stood in front of the mirror from the chest and looked at a 22-year-old woman in a shellfish. And then behind me, my name went to the top of the regional achievement rankings, and the World Channel lost its mind. Some of them thought I was cheating, some of them thought I was a man. A truly heroic number of them wanted to know if I was single. And one of them, a man called Zhang Bo, whom I had never spoken to in my life, started explaining to 1 million people that anybody topping the boards on day 2 had obviously found something and was obviously hiding it and should share it with the community. He was right on both counts. I ignored him completely. That cost me nothing at all that night. Day 3, I went back into Shanmu Forest for one specific iron chest. It was 9 meters up, wedged in the fork of a pine, and I had been thinking about it since the first afternoon. I was halfway up the trunk when a pine cone hit me in the head. I looked up. Nothing. I climbed 2 more meters. The next one got me on the ear, hard enough to make my eyes water, and this time I saw the tails. 3 of them, gray, enormous, hanging off a branch above me, and then I saw the squirrel they were attached to, sitting there with another cone in both paws like a pitcher checking the sign. Pippin, at the base of the tree, made a challenging noise. The squirrel hit Pippin directly between the eyes from 9 meters up. That was a beautiful shot. I laughed so hard I nearly came off the trunk, and the squirrel took the laugh personally and switched targets. And for the next 90 seconds, a grown woman in cellarfish armor and a bird rabbit were pinned down by artillery in a pine tree. Then it ran out of cones. We all looked at each other in silence for a moment. I got the chest. I also got about 40 pine nuts off the ground, which the squirrel watched me collect with an expression I can only describe as municipal. And then, when I tried to keep going deeper into the forest, it came down and got in front of me. Not attacking, blocking. It ran ahead, planted itself across my path, and made a noise. When I stepped around it, it did it again. It did that for 200 meters. It got more frantic every time. At the end, it was actually grabbing at my trouser leg with both front paws and leaning back like a small child pulling a parent away from a road. So I stopped, and I looked past it at where I had been going, and the map in my head just stopped. Not empty, stopped. Like a page torn out of the middle of a book, with the rest of the book still there on the other side. Fog of war. The system called it an unopened map and gave me one line of text about it, and the line said that the protection period does not apply inside. So the squirrel had not been keeping me out of a forest, it had been keeping a total stranger out of that. And I did the thing I would go on to do about 11 more times with steadily worse judgment. I gave it food. 1 honey bun. It took the bun in both front paws, sat down on its back legs, ate the entire thing without appearing to breathe, and then followed me home and never left. I did not name it. I called it Nutter because that is what it was, and by the time I noticed that this had become a name, it was much too late to do anything about it. We went back to the fog line on the morning of day 3, because of course we did. In fairness to me, I did not walk in. I crafted a wooden boat first, 6 logs, folded down into nothing in my pack, because the fog came right up against a coastline, and I have watched enough disaster footage to know that you do not approach unknown water without something that floats. I stood well back from the line, 20 meters. I brought both animals with me because leaving them alone at the house had somehow become worse than bringing them into danger, which is a decision I have made about 400 times since and have never once made correctly. And then my backpack tried to murder me. The Jade. It went off like a magnet finding a fridge door. It did not pull me forward, it pulled me sideways off my feet, and Pippin went with me because it was on my shoulder, and Nutter went with Pippin because Nutter had a grip on Pippin. The last thing I remember of dry land was thinking about my 1 pink slipper sitting in the doorway of a stick house 30 kilometers behind me. We came out over water, open sea, gray sky, no shore in any direction and no bottom under us, and a clock in the corner of my vision that said 5 hours 55 minutes and immediately began counting down. The boat saved my life inside the first 8 seconds. I got it out. It unfolded. I got 2 soaking animals and myself onto it and lay flat on the deck, breathing like something landed while the system cheerfully awarded me an achievement. Missed Pioneer. For surviving entry. For surviving entry. Not the map, the door. I sat up and looked around at an entire ocean with nobody else in it and thought, all right, let us find out what this is. I fished. What else do you do? The sea-grade net went over the side and came back so full I could not lift it in one go, and there was a chest tangled in it, and for about 40 minutes I had a genuinely lovely time out there. Sunlight through gray cloud, 2 wet animals steaming on the deck, a horizon. Then the water under the boat went dark. Not cloud dark, solid dark. Something the length of a bus slid under my hull and kept sliding, and I stood on the deck of a 6-log boat and watched public transport pass beneath my feet. I thought, well, at least it will be fast. It came up on the left side, one eye the size of a dinner plate, level with my knees, looking at me, except it was not looking at me. I followed the angle. It was looking at my chest, where the Jade was. Then it rolled the boat. I went into the water. I came up screaming, with a mouthful of sea and no idea which way anything was. And that fish put its head under my hull and flipped it back upright. Then it nudged the boat toward me. And then it waited, with the enormous patience of something that has never once in its life been in a hurry. I got back on board. It sat there. I do not know what my Jade is. I know that on the second morning I spent out there, a fish the size of a bus took one look at something my mother bought at a temple stall and decided that I was staff. I called it Deep Maw because I am not a poet. It hunted for me. That is the part nobody on the World Channel ever believed. It would go down and come up with tuna, with octopus, with things I still have no names for, and it would put them next to my boat and then float there radiating expectation until I collected them. And if I was slow, it would nudge them closer. I sliced my palm open on its dorsal fin the first time I tried to hold on, and I learned 2 things from that in the same second. 1, the 90% immunity does not work in here. 2, that fin will file your nails for you. I caught a great deal that morning, enough to feed my household for 2 weeks, and at the 4-hour mark, the sky went the color of a bruise. The storm did not roll in. That is the wrong word. It arrived, the way a decision arrives. It took the boat in about 90 seconds, just took it, tipped it, and there was no upright left to flip it back to. And I was in black water in shellfish armor that wanted very badly to be at the bottom of the sea. Pippin was somewhere. Nutter was screaming, high and thin, and I could hear it over the water and could not see it. And a fin came past me in the dark, and I got both arms around it and held on with a hand that was already open to the bone. I do not remember most of the next 40 minutes. I remember the cold. I remember that at some point the fear ran out entirely and was replaced by fury, which I have since learned is what my brain does at the end of being afraid, and which has kept me alive more times than courage ever has. And I remember thinking with total clarity, if I drown here, nobody on earth will ever know what happened to me. My file will just say, she went to bed. Then the water flattened out. The sky went from black to gray, and the screen lit up in front of my face while I was still holding on to a fish. Sea Storm Conqueror. First in the region. Rewards. A grade scuba gear, which arrived in my inventory sopping wet, which I still find funny. A silver treasure chest. And the map lifted its time limit off me. Unlimited exploration. Enter and exit as I please, forever. At the time, all I felt was cold and stupid. Here is what it actually meant. Every other player in that game was standing on the same continent, walking the same forest, fighting the same million people for the same boxes. And the game had just handed me an entire private ocean with a bus-sized business partner already on the payroll. I got home at dusk on day 3 with 4 achievements, a boat full of tuna, and a squirrel that flatly refused to be returned to the forest. It sat down in my doorway. It looked at me. Pippin made a long series of noises that I am confident concerned rent. I let it stay. Obviously, I let it stay. I cooked crab and tuna over a real fire in a house with 2 rooms and fed both of them off my own plate. Then I sat on a mattress with a bowl on my knees and thought, this is the best I have felt since I got off the plane. Then I opened the silver chest, an A-grade dagger with no durability limit, which sounds boring and is the single most useful object I have ever owned, because every other blade in that world is a countdown. And a scroll. Lick winged people archery, the system said, and gave me no further information at all. I put it on a shelf. I did not open it. I put a live teacher on a shelf and left him there for 4 days. and when I finally did open it, he brought that up immediately and has never once let it go. That was midnight on day 3. The protection period had 11 hours left, and I was the only person on the World Channel not asking what would happen when it ended. A man who collects achievements had already told me for a chocolate cake. Nova came back at 11 in the morning on day 4 in the same flight attendant voice to announce that the training wheels were coming off. Main quest: survive 8 hours. Keep shelter damage under 30%. Side quest, and this is where I understood exactly what kind of game this was. Kill beasts for points, 1 point each. Reward tiers at 50, 500, and 5,000. 5,000. They were not testing whether we could survive the day. They were testing which of us would go outside on purpose while it was happening. The World Channel in the hour before noon was something I have never seen the like of and hope not to again. 1 million people, and about a third of them were making jokes, and about a third of them were coordinating, and about a third of them had gone completely silent. I did not post. I put on the crab armor. I put both animals in the back room and shut the door on 2 extremely offended faces, and I stood in my own doorway at noon and watched the meadow line. At 4 minutes past, the first one came out of it. A cat. Gray, low, moving the way water moves downhill. The system called it a spirit cat and gave it a level I did not like. And 30 meters behind it, still in the tree line, something much bigger that I decided to call a shadow bear and very much hoped never to confirm. I did not fight the cat. I have said this before, and I will keep saying it. I am not brave. I am prepared. I had spent the entire previous evening packing scorpion venom into fish. Not the snake venom, which I was saving. Scorpion, bought off the World Channel in bulk from 4 different people who thought I was insane. I threw one of those fish out my door like a woman feeding a stray. The cat took it out of the air. It got about 6 meters before its back legs stopped answering. The bear was a different conversation. The bear took a fish, then another, then a third. Then it kept coming, and I had to fight an animal twice my mass in my own doorway with an A-grade dagger while it took the frame apart around me. I lost that fight. I was losing it badly, on my back, in the wreckage of my own wall, with one arm up. And a 3-tailed squirrel came off the top of the doorframe and put both front paws into that animal's eyes. I do not know how it got out of the back room. I have theories, and all of them are unflattering to my carpentry. We killed it together. I opened it up under the jaw while it was blind and screaming, and Nutter was riding its face like a rodeo. Afterward, I sat down in the wreckage with my hands shaking so badly I could not hold the knife, and Nutter climbed into my lap and began grooming blood out of its own tail. Casually, the way you fix your hair after a difficult meeting. Shelter damage, 22%. Under the line. And in the guts of a boar that came through an hour later, I found a plant. Frostgrass. And frostgrass does exactly one thing, and the system spelled it out in a single sentence. Plant it around a shelter, and beasts stop knowing the shelter is there. Every player in a region of 1 million people was about to spend the night getting their walls chewed on, and I was standing in a ruined doorway holding the answer in one hand. Now, I would love to tell you that I opened the World Channel and gave it away. What I actually did was open the World Channel and start selling campfires. Because here is what was happening out there. Nobody had wood. Everybody had spent 3 days grabbing food and nobody had cut trees. And now the sun was going down for the first time without immunity, and every single person in that region wanted fire between themselves and the dark, immediately, at any price. And a man named Zhang Bo had worked that out about 90 seconds before I did, and was selling 1 campfire for 6 logs. 6 logs. For a recipe that takes 2. So I posted 3 campfires for 6 logs. It took 9 minutes to break him. He dropped to 5 for 6. I went to 4. He went to 3. I went to 1 for 1 and posted publicly that I would hold that price all night and that I had a lumber yard. He started messaging me privately at that point. It got insulting quickly, and then it got specific. And somewhere around the 4th message, he stopped talking about campfires entirely and started talking about what kind of girl I must be. I blocked him mid-sentence and never read another word from him. He got himself killed somewhere in the 2nd week, and I found out from a stranger. I traded 10,000 times that night. I know the number because the system gave me an achievement for it. Trading Master. Every one of those people got a campfire for 1 log. I got a mountain of wood. Zhang Bo got nothing. And if you think that was charity, consider where I was at 2 in the morning. I owned the lumber supply of an entire region. Every trader in it had my name in their contacts, and the price of everything I would ever want to buy for the rest of that month had just been set by me. I did not sell the frost grass. I planted it in a ring around my house, and I told nobody, and I have made my peace with that. Then I went back to the sea, because the side quest paid by the beast, and there was an entire ocean of them with nobody else bidding. That was the most fun I have had in my life. I am not going to romanticize the rest of it, but that was fun. Deep Maw and me and a wooden boat, working an ocean like a 2-person crew. It herded. I shot. Things came up out of the dark, one after another, and my point counter went up in chunks instead of ones. Vampire squid, which are exactly as unpleasant as they sound, and which come apart if you hit them properly. A fish that was almost entirely mouth, which took 4 arrows and a great deal of shouting. By hour 3, I had 200 points, and I was in second place on a board with 1,000,000 names on it. Then we found the seahorse. Dwarf seahorse, the system said, which is the single worst piece of naming in either world, because it was 6 meters tall and it moved like a whip cracking. It got past me completely. It did not even engage with me. It went straight for the fish. I watched a creature the size of a bus take a hit that opened it from gill to belly. I heard the sound it made. And something happened inside my chest that I did not have time to look at properly for another 3 days. I killed that seahorse with the venom I had been saving for something else. Whole sack. On the arrowhead. Straight into the soft place behind the head, from 4 meters, in the water, with my legs shaking. It took 9 minutes to die, and I stayed in the water for all 9 of them, because if I got out and it recovered, it would have gone back to the fish. Then I sat on my boat with both hands in the sea, pressed against a wound the length of my arm, with no medicine and no idea what to do. And Deep Maw let me. It just floated there and let a 22-year-old girl be useless against its side for 20 minutes. It closed on its own over the next 2 days. I checked every single morning. It dropped a gravity bead, which slows a fall, and which I did not understand the value of until the day I went off a cliff. 753 points at the end of the day, first place by a margin that embarrassed me on a public channel. And then, at dusk, a storm came in behind us, and out of the storm came the serpent. White-spined sea serpent. High level. It fought me for 2 hours on and off that boat. It put me in the water twice. It broke my mast. The third time it came in, I was out of arrows I trusted and standing in 6 inches of water inside my own hull, and I threw the empty net at its face, which achieved nothing except making it angry in a direction that was not the fish. Deep Maw hit it broadside at what I estimate was the speed of a car. 2 things came out of that serpent. The first was enough lethal venom to fill a jar. I filled the jar. Remember that jar. It comes back twice, and the second time, it saves my life. The second was a quarter of a map, torn along 3 edges, lost undersea ruins, the system called it, and it added 1 line of description, home of the Ares clan, extinct. Extinct is a strange word to find in a treasure chest. I dove on it the next morning in A-grade scuba gear. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, and I only got 20 minutes with it. There are whole cities of light down there, coral that glows on a rhythm, in and out, like breathing. Broken columns lying at angles with fish going in and out of the gaps. Structures that were built by something with hands. And a trench going down past where my lamp reached, and out of that trench, a pull. A want. Not mine. I felt it in my back teeth and in the bones behind my ears. And it was patient. And it was interested. I did not go down there. I want credit for that. 22 years old, first ruin, and I looked into a hole in the ocean floor that was calling me by name, and I turned around. Then a weed the size of a bus caught my ankle at 14 meters. I went up so fast I saw stars, and I have no business having survived that ascent, and the only reason I did is that Deep Maw came in and ate the weed. Ate it. An entire alien plant that had been soaking in enough poison to kill a warehouse full of people. I screamed into my regulator. I got to the surface and hung off the side of my own boat, watching a fish do a slow lap and come back completely fine, and I have never in my life been so relieved and so annoyed at the same moment. It dropped a water-avoiding pearl on the deck for me, which is exactly the kind of thing it would do. I came out of the sea that afternoon with a pearl, a quarter of a map to a dead civilization, and the clear understanding that whatever is at the bottom of that trench had noticed me first. Then I went home and upgraded the house. Wooden house, basic tier. With a bathroom, with actual plumbing, in a survival game, on an alien continent, because somewhere in the design of this thing, there is a person who understands what people will actually pay for. I lay in a bath in another world with 2 animals asleep on the tile, and I thought, I could do this. I could genuinely do this. That was still day 4. At 9 in the evening, a message came in from He Zhuan, who was second on the board and had spent the entire day watching me pull away from him and who wanted to form a team. He was polite about it. He was extremely polite about it, which is how I knew he had thought about it for a while. I said no. That sounds like arrogance, and it was not. It was that I could not tell him about the fish, or the ocean, or the map, or the frost grass, and a partnership whereas hide 4 things is not a partnership, it is a con with extra steps. He took it well. He has taken everything well, every time, which is why he is still alive. The rankings settled at midnight and the rewards came in, and I have to list them, because the list is the entire point. First place. 10 expansion stones, which each grow a shelter by 10 square meters. A silver chest. 3 units of black soil, which is the only soil in this world that certain plants will touch. 3 additional backpack slots, 2 attribute points, and 1 teleportation stone. Then Nova made 2 announcements. The first was that regions 25, 85, and 47 were merging. 990,000 players in one pool. New neighbors, new competition, new people to sell campfires to. The second was 3 words long. Mist season begins tomorrow. I remember reading that and feeling absolutely nothing, because I did not know what it meant. Nobody did. The World Channel filled up with people making jokes about fog and asking whether it would affect fishing. The fog came in at 4 o'clock in the morning and it did not lift for 6 days. I woke up because it was wrong. That is the only way I can put it. I woke up because the air inside my own bedroom was wrong. Thick, cold, and tasting faintly of iron, and I could not see the far wall of a room 4 meters across. And then I could not wake up properly. That was the part that scared me. I had slept 9 hours and I felt like I had slept 2. My hands were slow. My thoughts arrived in the wrong order and had to be sorted. Pippin would not get up at all. Nutter got up, walked into a wall, sat down, and went back to sleep. The whole region reported it within the hour. Everybody sleeping double, everybody slow, and out in the fog, sounds. Not close at first. Something moving in a way that did not match its own footsteps. Something calling once and then stopping 3 fields away. Fire pushed it back. That was the first thing anybody figured out, and somebody posted it at 5:30 in the morning, and within 20 minutes it was the most repeated sentence in the region. For about 6 hours that morning, the campfire recipe was the single most valuable object owned by any human being on that continent, and I had given it away, for free, to a man with a chocolate cake 4 days earlier. If I had held it, I could have owned every person in that region by lunchtime. I have thought about that a great deal. I would still not have held it, partly because I am not a monster, and partly because a region full of people who owe you a favor is worth more than a region full of people who hate you. I would appreciate it if you assumed the first reason. I spent the first 2 days of the fog indoors, and I did not waste them. 10 expansion stones went into the floor. My house went from 30 square meters to 130, which is larger than any apartment I will ever be able to afford in any world, and I walked around it 3 times just to do it. Black soil went down in the new back room. I planted tomatoes, pumpkins, and eggplant, because I had eaten crab for 4 days and my body had begun filing formal complaints. And I opened chests. Piles of them, an entire wall of them, and this is where the game stopped being about food. 3 blueprints came out of that stack. A smart toilet, which, sure, fine. An air-breathing mask, which I filed and forgot and which turns out to matter. And something called a shelter wind-proof cover. I sat and looked at that one for a while, because that is a strange object to hand a person on the 6th day, unless you know something about the weather that they do not. And out of 2 silver chests came the 2 items that reshaped my entire life. The first was a cloak. Lost magician's cloak, and I did not understand it until I put it on, and then I did understand it and had to sit down. It does not put an illusion over your face. You put it on, you choose a race, and you become that. The shape, the scent, the way you move. Anything that meets you meets whatever you selected from a list. The second was a bow. Lick-winged people top single bow. Black wood and a string that was not string, and it was the most beautiful object I have ever held in either world. And when I picked it up, I remembered the scroll I had left on a shelf for 4 days. so I opened the scroll, and a man walked out of it. I need you to understand my situation. Alone, fog-locked house, 6 days of gray outside every window, and a scroll unrolled itself in the air in my kitchen, and a man stepped out of it and immediately looked around my kitchen with visible disapproval. Tall, long dark hair, feathers where eyebrows should be, which I did not comment on, because he was very obviously the kind of person who would notice me noticing. He looked at me. He looked at the bow in my hands. He looked back at me, and he said, in perfectly clear language, that my grip was wrong. His name is Joe Kai. He is, as far as I have ever been able to establish, a recording that argues back. A teacher stored in a scroll by a race called the Lick-Winged People, intended for a student who died so long ago that the scroll had collected a century of dust in somebody else's warehouse before it fell into a box for me. He taught me to draw a bow for 2 hours before he would answer a single question. 2 hours. In a fog, with things moving around outside. He would not discuss it. He adjusted my elbow 11 times. Then he answered my questions, and I wish very much that he had not. Mist season is real, he said. Mist season happens. But not like this, not this thick, and not this year. Fog on this scale comes when something has gone wrong with the balance of the continent. And the fog brings the pupil. I asked what a pupil was. He said, they have no eyes, they hunt by sound. And there are supposed to be a few hundred on the entire continent. I asked how many there were now. He looked out of my window into 6 days of solid gray, and he did not answer me. I killed my first one that night, 40 meters from my own front door. It came in on the sound of my own generator, which I had not thought about, which taught me more in 4 seconds than the previous 2 days had. I threw a rock to the left. It went left. I put an arrow through it from the right at 20 meters, and Joe Kai, watching from the doorway, said nothing at all, which from him is a standing ovation. It was the size of a large dog, and its face was smooth. That is the part I could not get past, and still cannot. Not a monster face, not teeth and horror, just skin, unbroken, where a face should be, like something that had been sanded. It dropped a marble with weather inside it. Mist orb, the system said. Crack one, and the fog clears 50 meters around you for 15 minutes. 15 minutes of being able to see, in a world that had just taken seeing away from 1 million people. I sold none of them. Here is the exact ratio of my kindness. Campfires, free, to everyone. Vision, mine. I killed 9 more over the next 2 days, and I got very good at throwing rocks. On the 3rd day of the fog, my spirit hit 30, and the Swo-ji technique upgraded itself inside my skull without asking. 500 meters became 1,000. And it stopped showing me only boxes. It started showing me things that were alive. I sat down on my kitchen floor, because the first time 1,000 meters of living creatures arrived in my head all at once, I genuinely could not stand up. There is so much out there. There is so much more out there than anybody walking around on that continent understood. It also told me, politely, in small text, that level 3 would require a fragment of the mysterious pivot. The mysterious pivot. Damaged. So the jade around my neck has been half of something since before I was born, and somewhere out there is the other half, and the game knows exactly where it is and has decided that this is my problem. 6 days is a long time, and I have made it sound like a weekend. The 2nd day was the worst one for everybody else. By then, people had understood the fire. Every shelter on the continent had a fire outside it, and the fog sat back about 10 meters and waited, and inside that 10 meters, people could see their own doorstep and nothing else at all. And the pupil learned. That is the part nobody expected from something with no face. On the first night, they walked into the fires. On the second night, they stopped and started circling and started using the sound of the fire to locate the thing that was tending it. The World Channel that morning was the single most frightening document I have ever read. Not because of panic, because of pattern. 11 separate people in 11 separate places describing the same behavior in different words and slowly, over about 2 hours, working out together that they were being hunted by something that was learning. A player called Fang Yu, who is famous in that region entirely for the quality of her swearing, posted a 9-word instruction that saved a genuinely enormous number of people. I am not going to reproduce it. 2 of the words are not printable, and the other 7 are, throw something, then shut up, then do not move. That was the whole solution, and a woman who had been banned 4 times for language is the one who worked it out. I hunted them because I could see them. That is the entire advantage, and it is not skill. 1,000 meters of map with living things in it meant that in a fog where a human being could see 4 meters, I could see a pupil coming from 1,100 paces away and take a position. I would like to say I did this for the region. I did it for the mist orb, and then, when I got good at it, I did it for the region as well. And the two are not separable, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. One of them came back. That is what I mean about learning. On the third night, I threw a rock, and it went left at a speed no dog moves at, and then it stopped, and turned around, and came back to the exact patch of ground the rock had been thrown from. It knew a rock was a rock. I killed it at 12 meters instead of 25, standing still, holding my breath, with a plant wrapped around my ankle so that I would not shift my weight. Joe Kai came out of the scroll while I was still standing over it. He crouched down and looked at the smooth place where its face should have been for a long time. Then he said, "They were not like this." I asked what he meant. And he told me the thing that has stayed with me longest out of everything he ever said, and he said it in the flat voice he uses when he is not teaching. He said that pupil are supposed to be a quiet species, that they live in deep places and are largely blind and largely harmless, and that in 400 years of lick-winged people records, there are 11 documented incidents involving them, total. Then he said that if you take a quiet species and breed it at scale and keep it in a box and use it as feed, you do not get more of the same animal. You get a different animal. And whatever the fog turned out to be caused by, he said, the continent was now going to have several 100,000 of that different animal in it, permanently, and no cage. Then he stood up and went back into the scroll without saying anything else, which he had never done before. The fourth day, I hunted 11 of them and mapped the direction they came from. That is how I found the mountain, and it was not deduction, it was bookkeeping. I wrote down where each one came from on a piece of paper for 4 days, and then I drew lines. Every line went to the same slope. The map in my head opened it up on the morning of the 5th day, when the range finally reached far enough, and I sat on my own roof in fog you could chew and looked at the inside of a mountain. Dozens of horned vipers. Elites among them, sitting in the map like coals in ash. And a pen, full of things that were alive and were not moving. The order in which I understood any of this matters, because I did not walk into that mountain as an avenger. I walked in because I could see chests inside, and I wanted them. I put on the magician's cloak, and I walked into a snake den on my own 2 feet. That is the stupidest thing I have ever done, and I would do it again tomorrow. I tested it first. I want credit for that. I put the cloak on in my kitchen and walked out to the meadow and stood 40 meters from a thing that had thrown me 8 meters through the air on day 2, and it did not move. Then I went to the mountain. The entrance is a crack in a slope with a sentry in it the size of a bus. I walked past it at a normal pace with my hands where it could see them, and it did not turn its head, and I got about 11 steps down the tunnel before I had to stop and put a hand on the wall because my legs had stopped participating. Then I kept going, and after the first 200 meters, something changed in me that I have never entirely got back. Because the cloak worked completely. Elite horned vipers looked directly at me and saw a magician on business. 2 of them moved out of my way. One of them said something to me that I did not understand and did not need to because it said it in the tone of a junior employee apologizing for the corridor being untidy. So I stopped creeping and started walking and went through that den like a health inspector. I have told almost nobody what is in there. The first chamber is the nursery, and it is warm and damp and smells like a hot coin. The eggs are in rows on shelves cut into the rock. They hatch in batches, and when a batch hatches, the newborns eat each other. Not by accident, not because the keepers were slow. That is the process. The ones that get out of the shell first eat the ones that are still coming out of theirs. And the vipers stand around the edge of the chamber and watch it happen with the attention of people watching a machine run. Afterward, they collect the ones that lost and take them away. I stood in a corner of that room with my hands behind my back like a magician thinking about something and watched an entire batch and did not move a muscle. Past the nursery, there is a rotation board. That is what I have always called it. It is a slab with marks on it, and the marks change, and I watched a patrol come off duty, walk past it, and change one, and I understood that I was looking at a shift roster. They are organized. Everybody in my region spent that whole month talking about beasts. These are not beasts. These are a workforce. Past the rotation board are the storerooms, and I noted the inventory and left it, because I had come for chests, and a chest is a thing you can carry, and a storeroom is not. and past the storerooms, at the end of a corridor that is worn smooth down the middle, are the pens. Stone, sealed with walls of solid mist orb, 3 meters thick, glowing faintly, which is why the whole corridor is lit. And behind the walls, hundreds of eyeless things standing very still, unable to see the walls that were holding them. They were being farmed. That is the entire answer to the fog, and I got it standing in a corridor in a stolen coat with my hands behind my back. Mist season is not a season. The fog is not weather. The fog is what comes off a pupil, and if you keep hundreds of them in one place for long enough, an entire continent gets fogged in, and every race on it stands around discussing the imbalance of the world. There is no imbalance. There is a business. I stood there for a long time, longer than was safe. Long enough that when I finally turned around, an elite 2 chambers back had begun paying attention to me. I could feel it. That specific quality of attention, the way you can feel a store detective across a shop floor without ever having seen them. And here is the thing about the cloak, which I worked out in that corridor and have relied on ever since. The cloak does not make you invisible. The cloak makes you into somebody who is allowed to be there. And the moment anything starts wondering why you are there, the cloak is doing nothing at all. I had about 90 seconds and one item that was worth anything, so I did not run. I walked back into the nursery, took the jar of white spine sea serpent venom out of my pack, and painted the walls. All of them. Every shelf. Every surface with eggs against it, working left to right at a completely normal speed in a room where a batch was due. And then I took a single scale off that same dead serpent, and I dropped it on the floor in the middle of the chamber where it could not possibly be missed. The scale is the important part. Venom on its own is just a disaster, and a disaster gets investigated. A scale is a signature. The white spine sea serpent is a sea race. It is not on land. It is not in a mountain in the middle of a continent. And a den that finds its nursery poisoned with sea serpent venom and one sea serpent scale on the floor does not begin an internal inquiry. It begins a war with the sea. Then I stole a silver chest off a shelf on my way out and walked toward the entrance at a completely normal pace, while behind me a race of organized professionals started working out which coastline they were going to have to burn. They chased me anyway. Of course they did. There is always one that is not fooled by any of it. I made it to open ground, and then 2 elites came out of the crack behind me at a speed that I am not going to try to describe, and I went north because north was downhill, and downhill turned out to be a cliff. I went off it. Gravity bead. 90 meters. I fell like a leaf, with 2 elites arriving at the lip above me and stopping, because whatever else they are not stupid enough to follow a magician off a cliff. And at the bottom of that cliff, standing in a rock face with nothing around it and no path leading to it, there was a hole in the world. A portal. Dead. Dark. Cold to stand near. And 2 elites already coming down the long way. So I used my 1 teleportation stone, the only one I had, the first thing I had ever seen that was worth spending it on, and I made that decision in about a second and a half, which is the fastest good decision of my life. I came out on Kirishima, Fog Island, the place the fog comes from, and under it, a second den, bigger. And in the middle of that den, a cavern with mountains of mist orbs stacked in it like grain in a silo. I stole several hundred, and that is the conservative number. I filled every slot I owned, and then started eating the food out of a slot to make room for more. I found their storerooms. I found their herb caves. And in the deepest cave, alone on a shelf, sitting in a space that had clearly been cleared around it, there was a wooden box carved all over with a totem. Nothing had touched that shelf in a long time. There was dust on every other surface in that room, and none on the floor in front of the box, which means things walk up to it and look at it and then leave. So obviously, I took it. An elite came around the corner while I was taking it. I got out on my last emergency exit and came through onto my own kitchen floor with my heart going like a bird in a box. Then I sat down and opened the box, because I am who I am. What came out of it went straight for my throat. Not a snake, a vine. Gold, smooth, no roots at all. It had about a second and a half of confusion after the lid came off, and then it decided the room was full of food. It got around my neck. It got around Pippin, twice, and started squeezing. It got Nutter by both back legs and pulled it off the counter. And I was on my knees on my own kitchen floor, going gray at the edges, while a plant that had been in a box for I do not know how many years made up for lost time. I got the silver chest open with the hand I had left. I do not know why. It was the only object within reach, and my brain had run out of ideas. Inside it was a contract stone, one use, bind one creature. And it went off in my palm like a flashbulb, and every branch in that room stopped moving at once. I lay on my floor, breathing through a crushed windpipe with a high-level mutant plant coiled on my chest. And it was frightened. I could feel it being frightened, because a contract runs both ways, and there was a thing in my head that did not have words and was very clearly asking what had just happened to it. I named it Viney. It liked the sound. That was the entire naming process. Viney is, and I say this with love, not smart. Viney has the emotional range of a very large golden retriever and roughly the same amount of foresight. It grows small fruit off its branches, and those fruit are parasites that will hollow out anything they touch from the inside, and it produces them and offers them to me the way a dog drops a ball at your feet. Hopefully. Wanting to be told it did well. Joe Kai came out of his scroll 2 days later, saw it, and pulled a knife. That was our second real conversation, and it did not go well. He stood in my kitchen and told me that alien plants are worse than beasts, that every race on that continent has a story about somebody who thought they had one under control, that there are 4 or 5 stories and they all end the same way. And then he said the sentence that I would think about at 4 in the morning for the rest of my time in that world. Your spirit is stronger than it. Make sure it stays that way. Then he put the knife away, because I asked him to, and told me the rest, because by then I had killed enough people that he had decided I was worth explaining things to. Every race on the Mist continent has a cap, a number of individuals that they are permitted to be. It is not a law. It is closer to physics, and it exists because a very long time ago something got past its cap and ate a civilization. I asked which civilization. He said it did not matter, which is a thing people say when it matters. Then he asked why I was asking about caps, so I told him about the pens. He was quiet for a long time. He went and stood at my window and looked at Gray for about 4 minutes. Then he said he was going to post a bounty, and the scroll rolled itself up on my shelf before I could ask any of the 11 questions I had. Nova made the announcement the following morning to every player in the merged region in the cheerful voice. Player Li Na has identified the cause of Mist Season. I have never been more uncomfortable in my life. The reward scrolled for a full minute. 5 teleportation stones, a great sword I have never once been able to lift, an alchemy table, a pet satchel, 20 yellow swan feather arrows, a set of A-grade fire scale crocodile armor, which is the reason I still have a torso, and a hair growth potion, which I have never used and which I have kept because it is funny. Then the bounties. Posted to every race on the continent and to every player in every region simultaneously. 1. Drive the horned vipers off Kirishima. 2. Repair the 3 portals. Kirishima opens in 3 days. The World Channel went off like a stadium. 1 million people who had spent 6 days blind in a fog now had a target, a location, and a payday. And I sat in my kitchen with a vine in my lap, reading the words, "Drive them off," and understood that I had started a war and put my own name on the invoice. Kirishima was chaos, and I mean that as a description and not as a complaint. Every player who could reach the coast reached the coast. Boats, rafts, a man who had somehow built a jet ski out of an engine and a great deal of ambition. And every single one of them went for the surface, the orb piles, the easy money sitting in the open. The beach comes first, because I came in past it, and because I have not talked about it since. I arrived at dawn on the first of the 3 days, on a boat with about 600 other boats. Nobody had organized anything. That is the thing that I still cannot get over. 1 million people had 3 days of warning and a shared text channel, and what they produced was 600 boats arriving at the same beach at the same hour, with no plan beyond get there early. The horned vipers were waiting on the sand. Of course they were waiting on the sand. They had been given 3 days of notice by a public announcement. I did not land there. I went around the headland, put in on rock, and climbed, and from the top of that headland I could see the whole thing at once, and I stood there for 4 minutes and made myself watch it. They came up out of the surf in a line, elites at the end, sweeping in, and the front rank of players did what people do, which was fight, and the ranks behind them did what people also do, which was push forward because they could not see. I have replayed those 4 minutes more than anything else in this story. I could have posted. I had the World Channel. I had, at that moment, more credibility in that region than anybody, and I could have written "Stop landing on the North Beach," and about 11,000 people would have read it inside a minute. I did not, because I was busy being clever about a headland. By the time I thought of it, somebody else had posted it, and the second wave went around to the eastern cliffs instead, and that is where most of the survivors came from. I have never posted about the first hour. This is the only time I ever will. I went underneath, cloak on, Viney in a pet satchel, which it hated and told me about continuously, both animals in the other satchel, which they also hated and expressed differently, and I walked into a war zone dressed as a magician and looted it from the inside while everybody was busy at the front door. The tunnels under Kirishima are not carved, they are worn. That is a different thing, and you can feel it under your hand. Something has been going up and down those passages for so long that the stone has taken a polish, and there are grooves in the floor at exactly the height of a body being dragged. Every viper I passed made way for me. 2 of them apologized. I am reasonably confident about the apologizing, based on posture. I emptied 3 storerooms, whole rooms, into a backpack, with the sound of the beach coming down through the rock above me the entire time, which is a specific kind of awful, doing inventory work over a ceiling that is making that noise. I took the herb caves apart, bundles, boxes, drying racks. There were herbs in there that Chinsu has since told me have not been seen in trade for 2 generations, and I took them because they were tidy and it was quick. And in a supply cache behind the 3rd storeroom, I found the chi wood, which is what the portals are built from, which is the second bounty, which the horned vipers had been stockpiling for years, specifically so that nobody could repair the portals and reach this island. I took every piece. Then I found the vault, and I want to tell this part properly, because it is the single largest thing I have ever stolen, and I did it by accident. It was not marked. It was 2 turns off a corridor I was using because it was empty, and my map showed a room-shaped space with nothing living in it, and I went in because empty rooms are where I do my thinking. It was a coin room, stacked. Not in chests, in stacks, on the floor, in rows, the way you would store firewood. Lua coins, which, at that point in my life, I had never seen, and which I recognized only because the system labeled them for me. I did not know what they were worth. If I had known, I would have taken longer, and taking longer would have killed me. I filled 4 compartments and left. I found out about 6 weeks later, standing in an auction house, watching a great magician count out 27,000 coins onto a table, that the pile in my backpack had been slightly larger than that one. Roughly 30,000 coins. Out of a snake den, in a stolen coat. Because I wandered into an unmarked room to think. Then I went and found the pens. There were 4 of them on Kirishima, and they were much bigger than the ones under the mountain, and the 4th one had a viewing area. I need to say that plainly and then move on. Someone had built a place to stand and look. I broke them with Vini because that is what it is for, and because it is extremely good at that one job. Walls of solid mist orb, 3 meters thick, and a rootless vine that splits into as many branches as it has energy for, going through them the way a wire goes through cheese. I did the first 3 in 11 minutes. Hundreds of eyeless things walked out into open air and did not know what to do with it. They do not thank you. They have no faces to thank you with. They came out into the corridor in a crowd and stood there in complete silence, and I stood at the other end of that corridor in a magician's coat and waited to find out whether I had just killed myself. Then they began to move, off in every direction at once, into tunnels, up through cracks, out, and the fog that had been sitting on an entire continent for 6 days began to thin within the hour, because their cages had been the only thing holding it in one place. An elite caught me at the 4th pen, not fooled, not for 1 second. It came around the corner and looked straight through the cloak, and I learned in that moment that the cloak does not survive contact with something that has actually met a magician and knows what one smells like when it is frightened. It did not shout. It did not raise an alarm. It simply came, at a speed I had no answer for, and I got 1 arrow off and it went in and did nothing. It went through my shoulder. In at the front, out at the back, and I felt the armor take most of it, and I felt exactly how much most of it was not. Viney got both of its branches into that thing's face and bought me 4 seconds. I spent them on the gravity bead and a hole in the floor that I had noticed 20 minutes earlier because I notice holes now. I fell about 60 meters and landed like a leaf on top of a portal I had spent the previous evening half repairing, and it worked, mostly, and it put me out somewhere on the wrong side of the island with my arm not answering. I bled on the floor of my own house for 2 hours before I got it to stop. 3 bottles of hemostatic potion to do what should have taken 1. I noticed that at the time and did nothing about it. And that is when the horned vipers put a bounty on me. Not the game, them. A whole race, formally, through their own channels, addressed to every race on the Mist continent, concerning a 22-year-old human girl with a plant and a stolen coat. I would like to report that I took this seriously. What I actually did was screenshot it and set it as my background. The portals took 2 days. Jokai supervised, which means Jokai stood behind me and complained about my technique from the moment I picked up the first piece of chi wood until the moment I put down the last one. The first portal I did badly and had to redo. The second one took 4 hours. The third one took 40 minutes because by then I had stopped listening to him and started listening to the wood. When the last one lit up, he stopped talking. He stood in front of it for a while, and then he said, in a completely different voice, that his clan had not been able to reach the Eastern Islands in 40 years. 40 years. A whole race cut off from half its world because a snake den wanted the raw material. Then he handed me the bounty payment and taught me a form and told me my grip was still wrong. The fog broke on the 9th day. I have never seen anything like the World Channel that morning. 1 million people, all posting photographs of the sky, the pupils scattered into every corner of the continent, which is a problem for another year. The horned vipers pulled back to a place called Dulu Island, with their tails between whatever they have. And I went home to a house with 130 square meters and a garden, and started building an actual life, which is the part of this story where I stopped being a person who survives and became a person with an economy. The week after the fog broke was the only quiet week I got, and I spent all of it working. The first thing I did was go and kill the tree fern. There is an alien plant that grows about 400 meters from where the kui kui tree used to stand, and I had been walking around it for a month the way you walk around a hole in a pavement. It is not mobile. It does not hunt. It sits in a ring of dead ground and waits for something to be stupid within reach. Now I had a rootless vine that had just eaten its way through 4 sets of solid orb walls, and I had a grudge, and I had a shopping list. Tree fern sap. It is the base ingredient for a whole family of strength potions, and there is no other source of it inside 100 kilometers. That fight is the first time I ever sent Viney in with a plan instead of a panic. I put 3 arrows into the crown first, from 40 meters, with fire ant acid on the heads. Not to kill it, to make it commit. It threw everything upward and outward toward the arrows, which meant that for about 4 seconds, the ground under it had nothing in it. Viney went in under the ground. It came up inside the root mass and split again, and kept splitting until the whole base of that thing came apart from the inside like a sleeve turning out. 11 minutes. And afterward, Viney sat in a heap of its own branches and did not move for an hour. I sat next to it and fed it 3 potions off my own shelf and told it that it had done extremely well. It grew a small fruit and offered it to me. I did not take the fruit. I have learned not to take the fruit. But I made a great deal of noise about how nice it was. 4 measures of sap, enough for a very long time. Joe Kai came out of the scroll that afternoon for the second lesson and spent the first 20 minutes on my grip. Then he saw the dead tree fern on my map because he can read my map over my shoulder, which I have never been comfortable with. And his reaction was not what I expected. He did not congratulate me. He went very still and asked me how I had killed it. And when I told him and got to the part about Viney going in underground, he put the bow down. He said, "That is not a hunting technique. That is what they do to each other." Then he sat me down on my own doorstep in the sun on the first clear afternoon in 9 days and told me how the Mist continent actually works. Every race has a cap. I already had that part. But the caps are not there for tidiness. They are there because of what happens when something exceeds one. He said that the continent has a memory, and that the memory is mostly made of gaps. There are islands out there with nothing on them but architecture. There are trade routes that end at a coastline that used to have somebody on the other side of it. And the caps hold for beasts and for people and for plants, but they hold most poorly for plants, because plants do not have the good manners to die of anything. Then he told me the thing about spirit again, and this time he explained it. A contract is not a leash. A contract is a comparison. Whichever side has more spirit is the side that holds the handle, and the game does not warn you when that number changes, and the plant will notice before you do. I asked whether he had ever seen it go wrong. He said yes, once, at a distance, and that the man in question had walked into the sea about 4 months later, and that everybody had agreed at the time that he had gone willingly. Then he picked the bow back up and told me my grip was wrong. I did what I always do when something frightens me, which is go and build something. The mountain bike had been sitting in my blueprint list since the first night. Copper, leather, plastic, rubber. 4 materials, none of which had existed within reach of me on day 1, and all of which I now had in quantity because I had spent a month buying anything anybody would sell me. It took 90 minutes and I could not stop grinning. It is not a good bike. It has 1 gear and the frame is welded by a system that has never met a cyclist, and the saddle appears to have been designed as a punishment. And on flat ground it does 40 kilometers an hour, which meant that the effective radius of my life went from what I could walk in a day to what I could ride in a day, and the difference is a factor of 6. I did a lap of the whole valley the same afternoon, with Nutter on the handlebars leaning into the corners, and with 1,000 meters of map in my head and 40 kilometers an hour under me, I stopped being a woman who walked a valley and became a woman who audited one. I emptied every buried chest inside a day's ride in 9 days. There is a version of me that is still out there, doing careful overlapping circles on foot, and she is about 6 weeks behind. That was also the week I found the Chungshur stones, which sounds minor and is not. They came out of a wood chest, 8 of them, in a bag. Rough gray rocks that glow steadily and forever, at about the brightness of a reading lamp, with no fuel and no heat. I put one in every room. I put one in the bathroom. I put one in the pet satchel, because Pippin does not like the dark, and had never told me so directly, but had made it extremely obvious. And then I put the other 4 on the World Channel for sale, at a price I set carefully high, and did not move. Which is how the trading war started. Because Song Haoran, out of the old 85, had 11 of them, and had been quietly cornering the market since the merge, and had a number in his head that he had been building toward for 2 weeks. He undercut me by 10% within an hour. I did not move my price. I posted, in the World Channel, the exact quantity I held, the exact price, and the sentence that I would not be moving it. He undercut by 20. I still did not move. Instead, I bought 4 of his. That is the whole trick, and I will explain it because it took me a month to learn it, and about 40 seconds to execute. A man who is undercutting to break you is spending his own inventory to do it. Buy the discounted stock while holding your own price, and he is paying you to reduce his own supply. At the end of it, he has fewer stones and you have more. And the price on the board is still yours, because you are the only one still posting. He worked it out on the 3rd day and stopped, and then sent me a long private message about market ethics. Joe Yang, who I did not know at that point, forwarded me a screenshot of him complaining about me in a group chat with the caption, "Thought you would enjoy this." That is how Joe Yang and I became friends. She sold me agrimony for a bottle of white wine that came out of a chest, and she has never once let me forget that she thinks she overcharged me. And Wen Jie spent that entire week posting long analyses of how I was manipulating the market. He was completely correct. Nobody cared. That is the thing about being correct, which he has never learned. You have to be correct about something people want to hear. And at the end of that week, 3 strangers walked up to my garden fence with a cart, and I found out that every single coin I had earned in that region was play money. The last thing I built that week was the pet satchel rig, and it is the single most useful object I have ever owned, and it is a bag. A silver chest gave me the first one. It is a shoulder bag with a soft interior that a contracted creature can be carried inside without being crushed, and, critically, it works inside a fog map. Before that, going into an unopened map meant leaving them at home, and leaving them at home meant that if I did not come back, 2 animals would sit in a locked house for the rest of their lives, waiting. I have thought about that more than is healthy. So I made a second one, out of leather and a waterproofing membrane and a great deal of swearing, and after that they came with me everywhere, which is a decision that killed me once and then saved me on the same afternoon. I sold the surplus mist orb that week too. Not all of it. I have a great deal of practice being accurate about my own generosity. I had several hundred, and I sold about 1/3 at a high price to people who had specific problems. A rescue team in the old 19 region bought 40 of them to go into a canyon after a group that had been down there since the 2nd day of the fog. They got 11 people out. I sold those 40 at cost. I have never posted about that, and I am mentioning it exactly once. Then I got a message from Joe Kai, delivered by a scroll unrolling itself in my kitchen at 7 in the morning, which said, "Come and collect the 2nd bounty payment, and also bring the tree." the kwei tree. That is when I found out what I had been growing by my back door for 2 weeks. He would not explain over the scroll. He made me come, and I could not come, because the lick-winged people habitat is not somewhere a player can walk into. So what actually happened is that he came to me and stood in my back garden looking at a tree for a long time, long enough that I went inside and made tea and came back out, and he had not moved. The kwei tree belongs to his clan. It is one of theirs, and it left, or was taken, a very long time ago, before anybody currently alive was born. Their entire economy runs on the fruit of a grove of trees exactly like it, standing around a cold pool in the middle of their habitat. That grove's yield has been falling for years. They have been looking for this specific tree for longer than I have been alive, and it had been growing in a meadow full of bones with a carnivorous plant sitting on it. I asked him what it wanted. He said he did not know, that the clan had never been able to work that out either, and that their current chief spends his evenings talking to the grove individually about their attitudes. I told him about the lightning. He said, so move it somewhere safe. I told him I had, and that it dropped every fruit within a day, and that I had moved it back and it had flowered in 5. He stood there with his tea and did not say anything for a while. Then he said that the grove at home has a protective barrier over it that has been there for 200 years, and you could see it land. You could watch a man do arithmetic he did not want to do. He took the bounty payment out of his bag and gave it to me, and it was 3 times what I had been expecting, and he did not explain that either. That was the last quiet week. I did not know it at the time. I spent it building a bicycle and winning an argument about rocks, and I would like it noted that I enjoyed every hour of it. Yuanyuan Island came first because I had the alchemy table and no herbs at all. Joe Kai told me about it in the tone of a man mentioning a place he assumes you cannot get to, which I have learned is how he assigns homework. Yuanyuan Island is an herb island with conditions attached, and the conditions are not suggestions. You harvest inside a window, 6 hours from when the tide turns. You pay to enter, in kind, with something living. And you take what the island decides to let you take, which is not the same as what you want, and if you get greedy, the island simply closes. I watched it close on somebody. There was a man from the old 85 region on my second trip who filled a bag past what he had been offered, and the path he had walked in on was not there anymore, and the sea came up over where it had been. I do not know what happened to him. Nobody does. There is a whole thread about it. I made 4 trips. On the first one, I took nothing but common herbs and read every label twice. On the second one, I learned the difference between agrimony and the thing that looks exactly like agrimony and will stop your heart in 4 minutes. I learned it by nearly picking the second one. Viney slapped my hand away because it could smell what I could not. On the third trip, I brought Nutter because Nutter can hear water moving under stone, and we found a hollow with 3 plants in it that the island had not shown to anyone. On the fourth trip, I filled 6 boxes and came home and slept for 11 hours. Then I started making potions, and I was extremely pleased with myself, and I was wrong about everything. The alchemy table is a cheat. I did not know that at the time. You put the whole plant on the plate. You select a recipe off a blueprint. The table hums and gives you a bottle, and any idiot can do it. I was that editing, cheerfully, for 2.5 weeks. Hemostatic agent in quantity. Breath potion for underwater work. Night vision. A general antidote. I made stacks of all 4 and lined them up on a shelf in my back room and stood there admiring my own pharmacy. Every bottle on that shelf was running at about 60% strength. I found that out much later on a plane of bones with a hole in my neck. The kwei tree went into black soil by my back door in the same week. That is the sunflower fruit tree, the one from the bone meadow. I went back for it with an axe, a shovel, and a plan, and the meadow tried to eat me for the second time, and I let Viney discuss it. That was the first time I ever saw Viney fight something its own size. It took 11 minutes, and it was not close. And afterward, Viney sat in a heap and would not move for an hour, and I fed it 3 of my own potions. I dug the tree up and dragged it home on a sledge made of 2 logs and a fishing net. Joe Kai came out of the scroll while I was planting it and made a sound. I asked him what. He said nothing. He said it 3 times. Then the weather turned, and the game showed me its other hand. It rained for 9 days. Not weather, volume. The stream behind my house became a river on the 2nd day. It became a lake on the 4th. On the 5th, it became my floor, and I woke up at 3 in the morning in 4 centimeters of water with a rabbit swimming. I upgraded to a light steel building at 3:30 in the morning, standing in the rain in my underwear, holding 2 animals over my head with one arm while I confirmed a menu with the other. Then the lightning came, and lightning in that world picks targets. I was inside. I watched it through a window. 3 strikes in 90 seconds, all within 200 meters, and the third one hit the kui tree dead center. I ran out into an active thunderstorm barefoot to look at a tree. That was not brave, it was stupid, and I did it without a single thought passing through my head. Every fruit it had grown was on the ground and cooked through, so I moved it. In the rain, with a shovel, at 4 in the morning, up against the wall of the house where the roof overhang would cover it. Every fruit it had left dropped off within a day. All of them. Green, unripe, on the ground. I moved it back out into the open, and it flowered again in 5 days. That tree does not want to be safe. That is what I finally understood, standing in mud at dawn, arguing out loud with a plant. Shelter it, and it stops. Put it out in the wind and the rain and the lightning where things can reach it, and it fruits like it has something to prove. I have never told Joe Kai how long that argument took. After the rain came a sandstorm, which is when I finally built the windproof cover, 40 minutes before I needed it. After the sandstorm came a cold front that arrived like a lid coming down, 12 degrees in an hour. My tomatoes died in a night, and in every chest I opened during that entire stretch, the game kept handing me the same category of object. Hobby house waterproofing membrane, anti-slip ice skates, a sled that required an engine I did not have, insulated everything. I stockpiled all of it and built none of it, because I had nothing to build it with and nowhere to go that needed it. Hold on to that. A stockpile is a joke right up until the day it is the only reason you are alive. The servers merged again in the middle of the cold. 25, 85, 19, all folded into 47. 1,240,000 players in a single channel, which is exactly the number Nova said on day 1. It took me 2 hours to notice that. The game had spent a month sorting a city into pieces, and had now put every surviving piece back into one room together, and the number on the wall was the number it started with, because the number on the wall had always been counting the same people. New neighbors meant new sharks. Song Haoran, out of the old 85, who priced iron like it was gold, and who ran his corner of the market with the energy of a man who has read one book about negotiating. Lin Xiaojing, who had been first in 25, and who lost that spot to me on the day of the merge, and who sent me a message that said, "Congratulations," and nothing else, and who I have liked ever since. Xiao Ru, who had a contracted beast and would not say where she got it, and who I eventually found out had done something considerably more frightening than anything I had. Zhou Yang, who traded herbs, and who has a laugh you can somehow hear through a text channel. Fang Yu, who got banned from the World Channel 4 times in 1 week for language, and who I once watched destroy a man in 11 words. Bai Jun, who sleeps. And Wen Jie, who decided within about a day of the merge that his entire personality was going to be having a problem with me. I want to introduce him properly because he does not deserve a proper introduction. Wen Jie was mid-table in everything, permanently. Every board, every week, right in the middle. And he had concluded that this was a conspiracy rather than a description. He undercut my trades at a loss. He posted long messages in the World Channel about how convenient my achievements were and how nobody had ever seen me fight. He organized, and I am not exaggerating, a group chat about me. It had a name. Somebody forwarded it to me. I ignored him for 3 weeks. It was very cheap to ignore him. That becomes relevant. The wandering merchants arrived in the 5th week, and nobody was ready for them because nobody knew they existed. They come to your shelter. That is the first thing. You do not go to them. You are in your garden, and there is a cart, and there are 3 of them standing beside it, and they have been standing there for an unknown length of time. They buy anything. They sell things that do not appear in any chest, and they are the only route to Luoluo coins, which is what the actual races of this world use, which meant that everything every player had been doing for a month had been happening inside a play economy with toy money. They have one other feature. Nova mentioned it once, in small text, on the day they arrived. If you owe them, they take the house. I watched it happen. A man 3 kilometers east of me bought on credit, because they will absolutely sell you on credit, and they are extremely pleasant about it. 6 days later, his light steel building came apart into nothing while he was standing inside it. Not the contents, just the house. He was left standing in a rectangle of flattened grass, holding a cup. He posted about it. Nobody was cruel to him, which I noticed and appreciated. There had been a lot of that in the first week, and there was much less of it by the fifth. My own first merchant came on a Thursday, and everything I know about dealing with the races of that world I learned in 40 minutes standing between my tomatoes. There were 3 of them and a cart. I did not hear them arrive, and my map did not show them coming, which I have never been able to explain and have stopped trying to. They were tall and wrapped, and the one who spoke had a ledger. He opened by asking what I had, which is the oldest trap there is, and I nearly walked into it, because I am a person who likes talking about her own inventory. What I actually said was, "What are you short of?" He looked up from the ledger for the first time. Then he told me, preserved sea protein, in bulk, because a race 2 islands over had a bad season. Iron, always, and anything alive that could survive being carried. So I opened with the tuna. I had 211 pieces of preserved tuna in a storage box, which is not a normal amount of tuna for a human being to have, and which existed because I have a private ocean and a business partner the size of a bus. He offered me 40 coins for the lot. I laughed. It was not strategic. It came out of me. And it turned out to be the single best move I made all afternoon, because the thing about a race that has been buying from panicking humans for a week is that they have not yet met one who found the price funny. He asked what I thought it was worth. I said I did not know. First time. Then I asked him what the last human he bought tuna from had accepted. He told me. So I pointed out that the last human he bought tuna from had been dropped into a wasteland 11 days earlier in pajamas and did not know what a coin was. He wrote something in the ledger. Then he said 400. We finished at 640 for the tuna, 1100 for the crab, and he bought every single arrow I had spare at a price that made me go and make more. And then, at the end, entirely pleasantly, he offered me credit. Anything on the cart, pay next visit. And on that cart there were 3 things I wanted so badly that my hands actually moved. A tool that identifies unknown herbs, a folding cold store, and a small brass instrument that he said would let me speak to one race of my choosing, permanently. I said no to all 3, because I had spent the previous evening reading a thread about a man 3 kilometers east of me, and about the noise a light steel building makes when it stops existing around a person who is standing inside it. He accepted that without any expression at all, wrote in the ledger, and left. They came back 9 days later, and the first thing he said to me was that I was the only one on this coast who had said no, and that consequently the price list I was being shown was a different one. I do not know whether that was a reward or a longer con. I do know that I bought the herb identifier at a price nobody else in my region has ever quoted me, and that I have used it every day since. That is the entire lesson, and it fits on a postcard. In that world, the moment you owe anybody anything, you are inventory. I did not buy on credit. I sold. I sold tuna and crab in industrial volume because I had an ocean nobody else could reach. I sold surplus arrows. I sold mist orb, finally, at a price that I set carefully high and then never moved, because I had spent a month learning that the number you say first is the number everybody argues around. I came out of that week with a little under 30,000 luo coins. I had no idea whether that was a lot. It turns out that it is an obscene amount, and that most players in that region ended the month with under 200, and that I only had it because I had also robbed a snake den of everything that was not nailed down. And in the middle of all that commerce, Deep Maw gave me a present. I had not been out to the sea in 11 days. That is the longest I had gone since the storm, and I had a reason for every single one of those days, and none of the reasons were good. It was waiting. Not near where I came in, waiting at the exact patch of open water where I had first come out of the fog on day 3, which is about 40 kilometers from anywhere I had used since, and which it had no way of knowing I would return to. I do not know how long it had been there. I have decided not to think about that particular arithmetic. I fished for 4 hours and did not need any of the fish. It herded anyway. I collected anyway. We did the whole routine like 2 people who have run out of things to say and are washing up together. And at the end of it, it came up beside the hull and put something on my deck, and then did the thing it does, which is float there, radiating expectation, until I engage with it. It was a plant. 6 segments, bamboo-ish, with a root ball packed in gray mud, and the mud had been shaped around those roots with obvious care by something that does not have hands. The system gave me 2 facts and no context. 100-day mugwort. It cannot survive outside the seabed. Each segment represents 10 years of growth. 60 years of a plant, presented to me as a snack by a fish. I said thank you out loud, which is ridiculous, because it does not have ears in any arrangement I understand. Then I sat on the deck with it in my lap and looked at an animal the size of a bus that had learned my boat. I was about to leave for 2 weeks, 9 hours in the wrong direction. There is no version of this world in which I can take it with me. I have never worked out what it wants. It has never asked me for anything. It has been given nothing except a wound cleaned badly by somebody with no medical training, and it has since given me a private ocean, 4 achievements, a pearl, a map to a dead civilization, and this. Whatever the jade around my neck is, it is not mine. I have been carrying somebody else's property for 22 years, and everything in that sea recognizes it on sight. I did not eat the mugwort. Something about the mud. Something about the fact that it had been packed and not simply pulled up. I put it in the safest slot in my backpack, on its own, in a compartment I could have used for iron, and forgot about it for 2 weeks. I am asking you to remember it. The card game started that same week, and I am including it because it matters later, and because it is the only part of this story that anyone from Earth would recognize as normal. A player called Duan Lei sold me a deck of playing cards out of a treasure chest for 2 bottles of water and thought he had robbed me. I taught Vini to play. It took 4 days, and it is the funniest project I have ever undertaken, because Vini is a plant with no eyes and no hands. It holds cards by growing a branch through them. It cheats constantly, without any subtlety at all, and believes it is getting away with it. Nutter learned in under an hour, and has never lost a hand. Pippin eats the cards. That was my household. That was who I had. On the night everything got put on a boat and sent out to sea. And then Nova, cheerful, Grabs announced the Starlight Auction House, and everything I had built got put on a boat and sent out to sea. The announcement went out to every player in the merged region, and it was short. Starlight Auction House, run by the Magician race, opening soon. A number of players would be selected to serve as acquisition agents. Selection by lottery. I did not enter the lottery. I did not fill out the form. I did not click anything. I read the notice, decided that working for magicians sounded like a great way to be somebody's material component, and went back to my garden. 9 hours later, my name came out of the box. I asked Nova how. Nova, in the voice of a customer service line, informed me that the selection had been completed fairly and wished me a pleasant experience. So somebody put my name in, and out of 1,240,000 people, my name specifically came out. I got on the boat because the alternative was finding out what happens when you tell a race of magicians no. The lottery drew at 6 in the evening, and I watched it happen the way you watch weather. Nova made a physical box. That is the part that still bothers me. It did not need a box. It could have picked 40 names out of a list and posted them. Instead, it manifested a wooden box in the air above the World Channel, where every player in a region of 1,240,000 people could see it, and it drew names out one at a time and read them aloud. It took 11 minutes. Somebody in the chat started a running commentary. Somebody else started taking bets on the next letter. And on the 31st draw, it said my name, and the World Channel made a noise I could feel through a text box. I sat in my kitchen and looked at it. Because here is the thing, I had not entered. I have gone over this a great many times. The notice went up at 9 in the morning. It had a form attached. I read the notice, I read the form. I decided that a fixed-term contract working for a race of magicians on an island 9 hours from anywhere sounded like an excellent way to become somebody's material component, and I closed it. I did not fill it in. I did not click confirm. I went out and dug up potatoes. So I asked Nova how. Nova, in the cheerful voice, informed me that the selection had been carried out fairly in accordance with the announced procedure and wished me a pleasant experience. I asked again, differently. Same answer, word for word, which is how you know you are talking to a wall with a face painted on it. So somebody had put my name in that box, and out of 1,240,000 names, mine had come out on the 31st draw. I have never found out who. I have 3 theories, and 2 of them involve a man with a cane. Zhou Yang was drawn 11th. Liu Wei was drawn 19th and posted 11 exclamation marks. He Xuan was drawn 28th. And Wen Jie was drawn 34th, 3 after me, and immediately posted in the World Channel that he found the timing of my selection very interesting. For once in his life, he had a point. I have never told him that. I packed for 4 days. Not clothes, categories. That is what a backpack with 32 compartments teaches you. Each compartment holds an unlimited amount of one thing, which sounds infinite and is not, because the constraint is not volume, it is variety. 32 kinds of object. That is the whole game. 6 of mine went to medicine, 4 to food, 2 to water, 1 to arrows, and 1 to poison, kept separate for reasons that should be obvious. 1 compartment went to the 100-day mugwort on its own, in the safest slot, because a fish had packed the roots in mud with care, and I had decided that I did not fully understand why. I nearly took it out. There is a version of that afternoon where I take a plant I cannot eat out of a slot I could use for iron, and I do not want to think about that version. I did one more thing before I got on the boat, and it is the reason a great many people are still alive, and I did it because I could not sleep. I went out to the garden at 4 a.m. with a glowing rock in one hand and counted the kui-kui tree. It had flowered again after the lightning, and after being moved, and after being moved back, and after 9 days of rain that had put 4 centimeters of water through my house. It had every reason to be finished for the season. 17 fruit. I counted them 3 times because the number was wrong. The grove behind the cold pool in the lick winged people habitat, with a 200-year-old barrier over it and a chief who talks to it personally every evening, produces under 10. And this one had done 17, standing out in the open in the wind, 400 meters from where I found it in a ring of bones. I stood there in the dark with a rock for a lamp and had a thought that I did not do anything with for another 3 weeks, which is that everything I had met in that world which was worth anything had been living somewhere it should not have survived. A tree in a bone meadow, a vine in a sealed box, a rabbit that slept through a migration, a squirrel that walked away from its own range after it, and a woman in strawberry pajamas with 1 slipper. Then I picked the last ripe one and put it in a storage box because I had already eaten 2 and the cap is 2 and I did not need a third. I very nearly ate it anyway. There is a version of this where I eat that fruit out of boredom on a 9-hour boat trip, and Joe Kai goes home to his chief empty-handed, and everything that happens afterward happens to somebody who is owed nothing. I put it in the box. Then I went and packed water. The boat took 9 hours. I never got another stretch like those 9 hours. Gray sea, flat. Autopilot not yet purchased, so I hand-steered for the first 4, and then discovered that if I wedged the wheel with a crate, it would hold a heading for 20 minutes at a time. Pippin sat on the cabin roof with its ears flat in the wind and refused to come down. Nutter found the highest point on the boat within 90 seconds of casting off, as squirrels do. Viney was seasick. I did not know a plant could be seasick. It lay in the bottom of the cabin in a puddle of its own branches and complained continuously in my head for 6 hours. And when I offered it water, it told me, and I am translating loosely, that water was the entire problem. I read the whole way. I had 11 blueprints I had never properly looked at and a notebook of herb notes I had bought from Joe Yang, and I sat in a wheelhouse on an alien sea in a boat made of 6 logs, reading, with a rabbit asleep against my ribs. I have had worse days on Earth. I have had a great many worse days on Earth. At the 8th hour, the sea changed color, from gray to a flat white, and stayed that way, and there was no line where it changed. It simply was one thing, and then it was the other. At the 9th hour, the building came over the horizon, and it is white, and it sits on a sandbar in water 2 meters deep, with nothing else in any direction, and it has no dock. You beach the boat. That is the arrangement. 40 players beached 40 boats on a sandbar in the middle of nowhere and walked up to a white door in a white wall, and there was no sign on it. Inside, it is bigger than outside, considerably bigger. I stopped in the doorway and did the geometry twice. And in the middle of a room that should not have fitted in that building, there was a man with a cane, waiting, who had clearly been waiting for some time and wanted us to notice that he had been. His name was Gao Ming. Gao Ming had a cane he did not need, a robe with too many layers for the climate, and the precise energy of a middle manager who has been told that this quarter is being evaluated. He gathered 41 players from every region in that room and explained the job like he was doing us a favor. Each of us receives an acquisition order. The order names a race, an island, and a list of items with prices beside them. You go there, you buy the items, you bring them back. The auction opens in 2 weeks. Payment on delivery. 500 luo coins per order. There was a silence in that room that Gao Ming read as agreement, and which was actually 41 people privately calculating whether they could refuse and get home. I put my hand up. I asked what the auction house takes per lot at a normal auction. He told me. He told me immediately, and with visible pride, because it is a large number, and he had been waiting 2 weeks for somebody to ask him something about his auction. I said, 800. He said 500, in the tone of a man closing a door. So I said the following, and I had it ready because I had spent 9 hours in a wheelhouse with nothing to do but think about what I was sailing into. I said that I had counted the doors on the way in, that the nearest coastline is 9 hours away by boat at speed in weather that has been building all week, that every race on that list has a reason to dislike us and no reason at all to trust a human holding a piece of paper, and that if he wanted 41 people to sail to 41 islands and negotiate with strangers on his behalf, he could pay for the boat. He said that players were replaceable. I said that in 2 weeks they were not, and asked him how long a new lottery takes to run, and whether the auction would wait for it. The room did not make a sound. We settled at 800, which is where I had been going the entire time. Then I put my hand up again because the fee was never the interesting part. I asked about the difference. If an order says a thing costs 2,000 and I buy it for 1,200, who keeps the 800? Gao Ming said the auction house keeps it. He said it the way you say something obvious. So I said, then nobody in this room will ever negotiate anything again. Every one of us will walk in, pay list price, and walk out. You will receive 41 orders at exactly the number you wrote down, forever, and you will never once find out whether that number was any good. And I watched a magician do arithmetic in real time. It takes about 4 seconds, and you can see it happen behind the eyes. Commission to the buyer. All of it. Every coin under the listed price. The room actually made a noise that time. Somebody in the back said something extremely rude and delighted. Then Gao Ming tried to sell us the autopilot, and I am going to enjoy this part slowly. Every wooden boat in that game can take an autopilot module. You enter coordinates and it holds a heading, which turns 9 hours of hand steering into 9 hours of reading. It is not a luxury on a 2-week contract. It is the difference between arriving able to think and arriving unable to. He wanted 800 coins for it. 800, which is one entire job, which is the exact number he had agreed to pay us 11 minutes earlier, and that was not a coincidence. That was a man who had built the whole structure so that the fee went out of one hand and came back into the other. So I asked him how many modules the auction house had. He said, enough. I asked how many they had sold in previous years. He did not answer, which is an answer. Because those modules had been sitting in a storeroom since the last auction, and the auction house had already paid for them, and every one that did not sell this year would sit there for another 2 years, being worth nothing. I offered 400. He said 700. I said 400. He said 650, and started talking about production costs, and I let him finish, and then said 400 again. We landed at 488, and I have never established why the 8, and I have decided it is because he needed to not give me a round number. And then, while he was writing up the discount list, I leaned over the table and said, quietly, that it would obviously be unfair to extend a group discount to players who had not participated in the group negotiation. He looked up. I said that 2 people in this room had spent the entire discussion standing at the back saying nothing, and had contributed nothing, and that it would set a bad precedent. And I named Wen Jie and the long-haired man he had been standing behind since we walked in. Gao Ming did not care in the slightest. That is the part that made it work. He was not doing me a favor, and he was not punishing anybody. He wrote 2 names on a list because a person in front of him had given him a reason, and he had 11 other things to think about. Wen Jie paid full price, twice, because his friend did not have 800 coins, and because Wen Jie had spent 3 weeks establishing, publicly, at length, in a group chat with a name, that he was the senior partner in that friendship. 1,286 luo coins. Everything he had. He came and found me afterward, in the corridor, and stood too close and told me that he knew what I had done. I said that I had recommended he be excluded from a discount, out loud, in a room, in front of 40 people, and that if he had been listening instead of sulking, he could have objected at the time. He did not have anything for that. I was not proud. I was delighted. Those are different, and I know which one I was. Then he asked what I would do when I ran out of people to be clever at, which is the single most intelligent thing he has ever said to me, and I have thought about it more than he would like. The orders came out of a bag. That is how they were distributed. A cloth bag, and Gao Ming held it up, and we reached in. 41 hands, 41 islands, no choice, and no swaps. Liu Wei drew a race of stone carvers 11 hours east and was thrilled. Zhou Yang drew a bird clan and immediately started reading up on etiquette. Xiao Ru drew something she would not tell anybody about and went very quiet. He Xuan drew a 2-day sail into weather and said, well, at least it is not boring. I drew Luo Wang Island. 4 items. Seller listed as Qin Su, race Wuxian clan. 2 of the 4 items had no agreed price at all, just a blank space and a figure in brackets, and at the bottom of the form, in small text, a line that said, contact has not yet been established. Nobody in that room had heard of Luo Wang Island. I asked the 4 people nearest me and got 4 blanks, so I asked Gao Ming. He said it was near the mist line and changed the subject, which is the most information I have ever received from a man refusing to answer a question. 9 hours later, I found out why. Luo Wang Island is guarded, not by anything with legs. I got 200 meters up the beach before the sand opened and a thing made of straw came out of it. And 40 meters after that, a second thing came out of the trees with a human face on every bean of its body. High-level mutant plants, both of them. Ku Yi vine and half-faced bean, and Viney took one look and told me, in the only way it can, that we were leaving. We did not get to leave. They herded us. I have never been herded before, and I do not recommend it. What saved me was a bottle off my own shelf, a potion I had made on the alchemy table 3 weeks earlier out of boredom, which turns the drinker into a bird for a very short time. And there is a specific horror in drinking something you made yourself while being chased. I got maybe 90 seconds of being a bird. It was not enough. I came down in the trees with 2 plants converging on me, and then a cooking pot came out of the sky and landed on half-faced bean. A cauldron. A flying cauldron, black iron, the size of a bathtub, with a woman sitting in it. She was about my size and looked about my age, and she had ink on 3 fingers. And she brought the cauldron down beside me and said, without any preamble at all, get in. That was Qin Su. Qin Su is an alchemist of the Wuxian clan. Specifically, she is the last one of them who does research. Everyone else in her clan buys her results, uses her formulas, and sends her requests. And she has lived alone on an island guarded by 3 carnivorous plants for years because it is quieter. She fed me first. That was the first thing she did. Not questions. Food, on a low table, in a workshop that smells permanently of scorched roots, and a bowl of small red prickly fruit that she pushed across at me like they were peanuts. I ate 2. My life value went up by 1, and my strength went up by 1. I put the 3rd one down very carefully and asked her what these were worth. She said she has a bush. Then she went back to sorting leaves while a human being sat at her table, quietly recalculating the entire value system of a world. Qin Su is an alchemist of the Wuxian clan, and I did not understand what that meant for about 2 days. What it means is this. Her clan sells mystic drugs to the entire continent. There are a great many alchemists in it, and there is exactly one of them still doing research, still improving formulas, still writing new pages, and she lives alone on an island guarded by 3 carnivorous plants because it is quieter than living at home. Everybody else in her clan sends her requests. She fills them. They sell the results. She showed me the shelf where she keeps the letters. It is a long shelf. On the 2nd morning, I finally showed her the acquisition order because I am there on business and I had spent 1 entire day not mentioning it, which for me is a record. She read it standing up, and I watched her face go through a sequence I would very much like to have on film. It started at polite. It went to puzzled. It stopped at a place I had not seen before and have only seen twice since. Then she went into the back and came out with a sheet of paper and put it next to mine. The acquisition order from the year before last. Same auction house, same items, same handwriting on the form. The prices on my sheet were between 30 and 70% lower. Not one item, every item. A whole column marked down on a document that did not say anywhere on it that it was a reduction, handed to 41 players who had never seen a previous order and had no possible way of knowing. I sat there and worked out what I was holding. Gao Ming was not underpaying the races. A magician cannot underpay a race and get away with it because the races talk to each other and have been talking to each other for a very long time. Gao Ming was underpaying the races through us. 41 humans walking into 41 halls with an insulting number on a form, in our own handwriting, with our own names on the delivery. If the price was refused, that was a human failing to negotiate. If the price was accepted, that was a margin. And in either case, the person standing in the room getting looked at was not him. I asked Qin Su what she was going to do, and she said, in exactly the tone you would use to discuss a delivery slot, that she was going to sell me the items on the list at the prices on the list. Then she got up and went into the storeroom. She came back with a bundle of drumu grass that had been stored in a warm room on purpose for 2 days, with the leaves gone papery and the medicinal content halfway to nothing. And a bottle of mystic drug that she cut with water in front of me, poured half out, topped it up, shook it, held it to the light, and nodded, satisfied. Then she put the year before last acquisition order on top of the pile and told me to put it in his face. She said, "You get what you pay for." And she said it without any anger at all, which is the part that impressed me. That was not revenge. Chin-Su does not do revenge, she does bookkeeping. He had written the number down, she was filling the number. I asked whether every other race would do the same thing. She looked at me like I had asked whether water goes downhill. She said, "Of course. 41 of you are going to walk back into that building with your arms full of the worst thing in every warehouse on this continent, and none of you will know, because none of you know what any of it is supposed to look like." Which is exactly what happened, and I watched it happen, and it was still funny the second time. The third thing that happened on that island had nothing to do with business, and it is the part I actually went back for. Pippin and Nutter came out of the satchel on the second evening, because the workshop was warm and there was food on the floor, and Chin-Su looked up from her bench and then looked again, and then put her tools down. She asked me where I got them. I said one fell out of a tree, and the other one threw pine cones at me for 10 minutes. She said that the rabbit was a Chuza tribe youngling, and the squirrel was a Jiguang weasel, and that both of those races migrate, and that neither of them lives anywhere near where I found them. Then she drank a translation potion and sat down on the floor and asked them. I have thought about the next 20 minutes a great deal since. Pippin slept through the migration. That is the whole story. The Chuza tribe moved at night the way they do every year, and one very small one was asleep in the wrong hollow and did not wake up, and by the time it did, there was nothing to follow. It had been in that pine forest for an unknown length of time before I got there. It had been in a tree. It had been dropping out of trees at things, apparently, for a while, because that is what its aura is for, and because it did not have anything else to do. And Nutter went after it. Not with it, after it. Nutter is a Jiguang weasel, different race entirely, different part of the continent. It noticed a lost youngling of a species it has no relationship with. It left its own range to go and look, and then it could not find the way back. 2 years, that was its estimate translated. 2 years of a squirrel that could go home if it knew which direction home was, staying in a pine forest where the food is bad, throwing pine cones at anything that came too close to a rabbit that did not know it was being guarded. That is why it blocked me on the path to the fog line. It had been doing that job for 2 years before I turned up, and it did not stop doing it just because I brought toast. I did not say anything for a while. Then I asked Chin-Su whether the Chuza tribe could be found. She said probably. She said migration routes are recorded and that somebody in her clan would have them. And I sat on the floor of a workshop with a rabbit in my lap and thought about the fact that I had spent a month calling them my animals. I have not raised it with either of them since. I am aware that this is cowardice. Nutter has a contract with me and could ask at any time and has not. And Pippin did not have a contract at all at that point and stayed anyway. And I have decided that until one of them brings it up, the subject is closed. That is what I mean when I say I did not want to leave that island. 5 days. A woman who does not ask questions. A warm room. A shelf of notebooks. 3 animals asleep in a heap. And rain on the roof for the entire time. I have had 1 week like that in 2 worlds. I am aware that I was supposed to be running an errand. I have made my peace with it. Because on the 3rd morning, I made the mistake of showing her my alchemy table. I was proud of it. That is the humiliating part. I set it up on her bench next to her equipment, like a person showing off a new phone, and I put an agrimony plant on the plate and made her a hemostatic potion in 90 seconds. Chin-Su watched the whole thing without moving. Then she picked up the bottle, uncorked it, smelled it, and put it down again, and looked at the table the way you would look at a microwave that somebody had installed in a kitchen you respected. She said, "You put the whole plant on it." I said, "Yes." She said, "An agrimony has at least 8 leaves. A hemostatic agent takes 2. Then she did the arithmetic out loud, and I want to reproduce it because it took about 40 seconds and it retroactively rewrote 3 weeks of my life. 2 leaves per bottle, 8 leaves per plant. 4 attempts from 1 plant at a 50% success rate is 2 bottles minimum out of the same material that the table turns into exactly 1. and the one the table makes runs at about 60% of the strength, and the two an alchemist makes get better every time the alchemist does it, because a person improves and a plate does not. I had a shelf at home with about 110 bottles on it. I had been carrying that shelf around like a pharmacy. I had bled on my own floor for 2 hours after Kirishima, going through 3 hemostatic potions and thinking, at the time, that the wound must be worse than it looked. The wound was fine. The medicine was bad. I had made it myself, out of 6 times the material it needed, and I had been pleased about it. I asked her who makes the tables. She said, not us, the magicians make them. Specifically because the Wu Xian clan's prices annoyed them, and specifically to rout around a clan that has held a monopoly on medicine for a very long time. And it works. That is her actual complaint, and she said it without any heat at all. It works well enough. Anybody can operate it. It takes no training, and it gives you a bottle that is 60% as good as the real thing for 0% of the study. Then she said that if her clan keeps buying them because they are cheaper than a proper cauldron, then in 20 years there will be no reason for anybody to learn alchemy, and there will be no new formulas, because a plate does not invent anything. I asked whether her clan had thought about that. She said her clan had thought about the cost of a cauldron. Then she said, in the same level voice, sorting leaves the entire time, that as of today she would not be sending the clan any new formulas or any improved versions of old ones. Not one. Not to anybody. And that the magicians could see how they liked developing new props without high-potency mystic drugs to test them on. I sat there and did some arithmetic of my own, because most of the mystic drug blueprints in circulation on that continent originated with her, which means most of the blueprints coming out of treasure chests originated with her, which means every player in every region was about to notice, over the following months, that a certain kind of drop had stopped appearing, and none of them would ever know why. A woman on an island had a bad morning, and the loot tables changed. Then she shoved my blueprints back into my hands, got up, and dragged me into a warehouse. It is full of cauldrons, rows of them. And I did what I always do, which is touch everything. And then I picked the one that was completely black with 2 small handles on the sides, because it looked good. I asked whether they fly like hers. She said of course not, these are the basic ones. Hers was passed down inside her clan, and is supposedly made of mixed flow stone, and only flies because she formed a contract with it. I asked whether I could form a contract with mine. She said no. I pulled it out of the rack and dropped it on the floor with a noise that made both animals leave the room. Then she would not let me touch it for 3 days. 3 days of notebooks. There is a shelf in that workshop, floor to ceiling, and it is not a library. It is her working notes going back years. Every herb drawn by hand, characteristics, processing method, what it goes into, what it must never touch. I looked at that shelf and felt my stomach drop, because it had taken me several days on and off to get through one alchemy notebook at home. She said a lot of it repeats, and I would get through it faster than I thought. I read the whole shelf in 3 days. I sat on the floor with a glowing rock for a lamp and read while rain came down outside and a cauldron bubbled behind me, and neither of us said anything for hours at a time. On the second evening, the light went, and I did not notice until Nutter and Viney reminded me that I had eaten breakfast and nothing else. When I turned the last page, she asked whether I had memorized it. I said I would not dare say everything, but about 90%. She put her tools down and looked at me for a second, and then said, in that case, come here. Then she put a flower stamen stone on the bench and told me to calcine it with fire and quench it in yellow wine, 3rd or 4th box on the left. The flattening machine is bad. It took 200 presses to get a small amount of that stone to powder. My wrists were finished. I was halfway through wondering whether Viney could crush it for me when she said, without turning around, that the flower stamen stone can only be crushed by hand. A rootless vine is not gentle enough and would damage the core inside. She had not looked up. She had heard me think about it. I failed the first potion. The liquid went off with a bang and splashed up the side of the cauldron and turned from blue to gray, and Chinsu said it was a timing problem and I should have pulled the smallest heat stone at that exact point. I failed the second one on the cat's eye, which will not melt if it floats and has to be pushed under with a glass rod. I failed the third one and did not even find out why, because she just said no, in the tone of a person watching somebody park badly. And after the third one, I sat there with every single step of that process correctly memorized in my head, and my hands refusing to execute any of it, and I thought, What was the point of 3 days of reading? So I got up, went to the shelf, took down the notebook for that potion, and copied the entire page out longhand. That is what I do. When my hands will not do a thing, my hands will at least do that. Chinsu said, mildly, that alchemists fail the first few times, and that even she cannot guarantee a success. I asked what her success rate was. She said she did not know. Maybe over 90%. The last time she accidentally turned an antidote into a poison was more than 10 years ago. More than 10 years ago. That is not 90%. That is a woman being polite to a beginner. Half an afternoon later, she woke up from a nap to find me standing over her, holding a tube of pale blue liquid with both hands like a newborn. Breath potion. The label said 30 minutes and then crossed it out and said 16, because the practice herbs are old and weak, and I did not care at all, because it was mine and it worked. She took it, uncorked it, smelled it, and gave it back. Then she said, "Put it away, newbie alchemist. This is the first mystic drug you have made. Congratulations on entering alchemy." After the first bottle, it gets much easier. I have been given an enormous number of things in that world. A private ocean, an unlimited dagger, 30,000 stolen coins. None of them landed anywhere near where that landed. I asked whether she wanted it, since they were her herbs and her cauldron. She waved it off and said the practice herbs are too old to make anything sellable, so the potion is half strength, so keep it as a souvenir or drink it yourself. 16 minutes of breathing underwater is not a souvenir. I put it in the front pocket. She said after the first bottle it gets much easier, and she was right, and I hate how right she was. The second one took 2 hours from raw materials to sealed bottle. Night vision, 14 minutes instead of 30, and it came out clean on the first attempt. And the screen went off in my hand. Intermediate alchemist, 5 different mystic drugs successfully crafted. First in the region, first in the whole country, 1 attribute point, and a line at the bottom that said, "Dear alchemist, you have reached the threshold." The threshold, after 5 bottles. I looked at the shelf of notebooks behind me and understood what the word threshold was doing in that sentence. Then she left me alone with a box of practice herbs and went out on the cauldron to collect branches off the alien plants on the island. The rain had been going for so long that they had gone, in her words, crazy. She wanted to work on their bodies. She came back after dark, soaked, having nearly been dragged out of the sky by a plant, and asked me casually what my success rate had been. I held up 2 fingers. 2 sets of materials, 2 bottles, so about 50%. She said, "That high. Then we will do 2 more tomorrow, and more after that, and using the weak herbs to practice now will save an enormous amount of good material later." I only noticed what she had done there much later. She had a plan for my week. She had made it on the first afternoon. She never once told me it was a plan. And the difference between the table and the cauldron, which I now understood in my hands and not in theory, was about to be the exact difference between me living and me not. I stayed 2 more days. I made 6 more bottles. We slept on my wooden boat both nights because the workshop has no bed. Chinsu is asleep about 11 seconds after going horizontal, every single time. I lay there listening to rain on a hull with a plant on my chest and 3 animals in a pile against my ribs, going through recipes in my head. Then I checked my messages and found 99 of them. Zhou Yang from the auction house, over 2 days. Everyone was back. Everyone had delivered. And Gao Ming had thrown their items on the floor, refused to pay a single coin, stopped issuing new orders, and locked 40 players in a building on a sandbar. And he was asking, over and over, when Li Na was coming back, which told me everything. Because here is what had happened while I was learning to grind a rock. Every race on the continent had done exactly what Chinsu did. 40 players had walked in with insulting prices, and 40 races had smiled and gone into the back and dug out the garbage nobody had wanted for a decade, and every single player had come back proud of a bag of trash they could not identify. Gao Ming had a warehouse of unsellable junk, an auction in a week, and a great magister who was going to ask questions. So he needed one person to blame, and I had helpfully spent 5 days being unreachable. I have since had the whole of those 2 days described to me by 4 separate people, and I'm going to tell it because I was asleep on a boat for most of it, and because it is the funniest thing that has ever happened on my behalf. 41 players came back to that building over about 30 hours, all of them pleased with themselves. Gao Ming opened the first bag, looked inside, and threw the contents on the floor. He did the same with the second. By the fourth, he had stopped opening them individually and started asking the room, generally, whether anybody had brought back anything at all. Then he stopped issuing new orders. Then he stopped paying. And then he locked the doors, which he is entitled to do because it is his building and there is nowhere to go. The players did what people do, which is organize. Xiaoru asked in front of everybody why nobody had been paid. Feng Hua pointed out that she had been in the first group back, had been sitting there for 2 days, and was neither being sent out again nor being released. And Gao Ming answered every single one of those questions with the same sentence in different arrangements. When is Li Na coming back? Which is how 40 people worked out simultaneously that they were not the problem and were never going to be the solution. They also worked out, some of them, what he was actually doing. Because they had been sent out with a price list and they had come back with garbage, and there is a version of that story where the buyer failed. And I was the one player still out there, unreachable, on the only order with a blank space where a price should be. I was going to be the reason. And on the second evening, into that silence, Wenjie said out loud to a room of 40 people that if Li Na died out there, would Gao Ming still discuss payment with the rest of them. Consider the timing. 2 days of no pay, no orders, no exit, and everybody in that room aware that their fee was tied to my continued existence. Every head turned. Liu Wei, sitting on the outside edge of the group, slowly raised one hand and extended his middle finger, and then said, out loud, that it was none of Wenjie's business, and asked whether he had considered not talking. Liu Wei has been banned from the World Channel roughly every 4 days since the merge for language. He has since told me that this was the single most satisfying moment of his life, because inside Starlight Auction House there is no automated moderation. Zhou Yang looked Wenjie up and down twice, said nothing at all, and turned around. And the other players, from regions who had never met me, who had no reason to care whether I lived, looked at a man who had just publicly hoped for a colleague's death in front of the only person who could pay them. They concluded, unanimously, that there was something wrong with him. Fighting is not permitted inside Starlight Auction House. So for the remainder of that evening, he was simply stared at from all sides, and occasionally somebody would come over and poke him, which is apparently not fighting. Nobody sat next to him for the rest of the contract. Meanwhile, in a different room, Gao Ming was sitting in the dark with his head in his hands, and I know this because Yedzu told me later, with enormous enjoyment. Because he had understood the problem on the first bag. He had wanted to lower the acquisition price. He had not wanted to lower the quality of what came back. And it had genuinely not occurred to him that these were the same lever. If those items went into his auction, the auction was finished. Not damaged. Finished. Starlight Auction House exists because the best of everything on the continent passes through it, and every race that walks in and sees a table of stripped roots and bald feathers stops walking in. And he could not go back to the sellers. The transactions were complete. The forms were signed, in his own handwriting. So the only people left to be angry at were the people who had carried the forms. He had a plan. The plan was me. Blame the one player who negotiated, who argued in the meeting, who was demonstrably difficult, who had been unreachable for 5 days, and who happened to have drawn the only order that came back with the prices renegotiated upward. The magicians who built the props for that auction have been developing them for years and were selling them at this one. He needed to hand them somebody. And then, while he was sitting there in the dark rehearsing it, another magician walked into his room and sat down opposite him, Jade. She put a sheet of paper on the table between them and said that Great Magister Fan Bo had heard he was having difficulty selecting items and had granted her permission to come and help. I have thought about the timing of that visit a great deal. Jade did not arrive early. She did not arrive late. She arrived on the exact evening that the problem had become undeniable and had not yet been reported, which is the one evening in the entire calendar when the offer of help is a trap, because there were only 2 answers, accept, and she is co-running the auction, and the mess is shared, and so is the credit. Refuse, and the mess is his alone, on the record, in front of a witness, by his own choice. Gao Ming did not take the paper. He leaned back away from the table, which is what a person does when they have decided something before they have finished thinking about it. He did not need her assistance. There was indeed a problem with the auction items. He would resolve it tomorrow. And he would report to the Great Magister himself, without a messenger. She asked if he was sure. He said, confirmed. And she smiled, for the first time since she had entered the room, and wished him a successful auction and a smooth promotion. Then she left, and he sat there tapping the arm of his chair, and did not sleep. He had spent a great deal of effort winning the right to run that auction, A 10% increase in profit over the previous year would have made him a grand mage inside his clan. That is the whole reason the prices on my form were what they were. I did not know any of this. I was asleep on a wooden boat in the rain 9 hours away with a plant complaining in my head about the sea. I found out the shape of it 2 days later in a corridor from a woman who was enjoying herself enormously. I told Zhou Yang I would sail back in the morning. That was not good enough for him. The next day, a teleportation stone came through Zhou Yang's shop from Gao Ming, free, from a man who had spent an entire negotiation trying to charge me for an autopilot. I checked. I asked for it in advance. I got it in hand before I agreed to anything, and I still went into the water, and the water is where it went wrong. The plan was simple. Pack the boat, get in the sea, use the stone, arrive dryish and annoyed. I got in the sea. A wave came over, and my backpack pulled me down. Not the current, the pack. The Jade, doing on day 31 exactly what it had done on day 3, magnet-finding fridge, and this time there was no beach to be thrown onto. There was cold and pressure, and then my fingertips touched something that was not water. I came out coughing on my hands and knees on hot sand, desert, dunes to the horizon. The rain and the gray sea gone like a channel change. Current temperature 48, feels like 52. Ultraviolet index 12, which is a number they do not use on Earth. Air humidity 10%. And in the corner, a clock. No snail hourglass in inventory. Exploration time remaining 5 hours 57. An unopened map, my second one, and this one had not given me a fish. I got the boat out for shade, which was the correct decision for about 4 minutes. Then the deck tilted, and I went out onto it and looked over the side, and the sand around my hull was moving. Quicksand, chewing, a 6-log vessel going down at a steady rate with a cracking noise coming up through the boards, and the map in my head insisting that there was nothing underneath me, which is exactly what a hole says. I told Viney to put a branch into the solid ground outside the patch, and to pack the boat and throw me clear the moment I was up the mast. It worked. I have never repeated it. I came off the top of that mast on the end of a golden vine and landed on my back in sand at 52 degrees. The boat came out of the pit behind me in a shower. I lay there for a second doing the other version of the timing. The boat goes down with everything in it. Everything. All the water. All the medicine. Then I got up because the ground was cooking me through my clothes. The nearest dune was under 500 meters away, and the leeward side of a dune runs about 10 degrees cooler than the sunlit side, which is a fact I knew because I had read it in a magazine on a plane. I have never been so grateful for an in-flight magazine. I tucked Viney inside my shirt because its branches were already going brown at the tips, and it had gone very quiet, which is the frightening thing with Viney. I put a towel over my mouth and nose. I put my coat over my head like a tent, and I walked 500 meters, stopping twice, with my stomach trying to come up the whole way. At the dune, I threw the coat down as a mat and got everything out at once. Blue water shell, filled, cold, Viney in it. Both animals given a few mouthfuls and put straight back in the satchel because they are covered in fur and this was not survivable for them for even a minute. Heat stroke medicine, drunk. Medicated oil on both wrists to smell when my head went soft. Wet towel on the back of the neck, reapplied about every 8 minutes. Sunscreen everywhere, twice. I did all of that correctly and in the right order, which matters because of what my brain did next. It started about 40 minutes in. There was no seam. That is the thing I keep coming back to. It did not feel like an intrusion. It arrived in my own voice, with my own accent, using my own sentence structure. The first one was, why does it get to be cool? That is all. A perfectly reasonable observation about a plant in a bowl of cold water and me in the sand. The second one, some minutes later, was, it is not helping me. And I remember agreeing with that one. I remember thinking, yes, that is true. I carried it here. I found this shade. I filled that shell, and it is in the water, and I am not. The third one was, it should feel this with me. And my right hand was on the rim of the shell, and my left hand was pressing down on the base to tip it. My vision had gone yellow at the edges. I was going to pour a high-level mutant plant out onto sand hot enough to cook meat on. I did not fight it. There was nothing there to fight. It did not feel like being taken over. It felt like being correct. Viney had been splashing water at me and talking the entire time and getting no answer, and it finally noticed that something was wrong. So it came up out of the water and laid a cold branch along the side of my neck and patted my cheek with it twice, the way it does when I have fallen asleep at a workbench. The yellow went out of my vision like a light switch. I looked down and saw my own 2 hands on that shell and understood exactly what I had been about 9 seconds from doing, and I put my entire face into the water and held it there until I ran out of air. Then I did it again. Then I wrapped 2 of Viney's branches around my neck and sat there with my eyes shut and let it cool me. 9 seconds. That was the margin. Killing something that trusts me in a place I had chosen for a reason I had invented. And then I got the cauldron out. Because the notebooks had a page for this, because I had read the entire shelf 4 days earlier. Cooling potion. And the note underneath it, in Chinsu's handwriting, said that this one cools the head and not the body, and to please read the instructions carefully before use. Dengshin grass, 1. Eupatorium, 1. Gujing grass, 2. I had the eupatorium, I had the gujing grass, I did not have Dengshin grass. So I opened the world channel from the middle of a desert that was actively hunting my personality and went shopping. I had been banned 3 days earlier for the volume of my trading, and the ban had expired the previous day, which meant that the first thing 1 million people had seen from me in 3 days was a woman asking, with no context whatsoever, to buy one specific weed. The channel came apart. Somebody wrote that the boss was out. Somebody else pointed out that this was the second day after a 3-day silence and that I had finally spoken. 3 separate people asked what Starlight Auction House was like and how many coins you could earn there. Somebody said I should be back soon because it had been 5 days, and somebody, bless them, told everybody else to stop spamming because they were burying the trade request. 2 players had Dengshin grass. The first wanted a blueprint. 1 blueprint for 1 stock. I skipped him without replying because Dengshin grass is valuable, and a blueprint is a permanent capability, and I was not going to make that trade even to save my own mind, which tells you something about me that I have chosen not to examine. The second had 2 stocks and wanted a B-grade dagger with over 200 durability. I got him down to 180. Sit with that for a second. 48 degrees, skin going red through sunscreen, a brain that had, within the hour, tried to murder my houseplant using my own voice, and I spent 4 minutes haggling 20 points of durability off a dagger because the number was wrong. I would do it again. The number was wrong. Then I laid out my tools on a coat in the sand and told Viney that when I stopped moving and looked at it, it was to hit me. It hit me twice. 2 batches failed. That is 8 portions of material gone, in an environment where my hands were unsteady and the heat was pulling the timings around, and I only had so much. The 3rd batch came out. I drank the first bottle straight out of the cauldron, still warm, in a desert, and my head cleared like somebody opening a window in a sealed room. Clearer than when I had arrived. Clearer than I had been for an hour before I even fell in. 1 hour of protection per bottle, according to the label. I had 4 hours left on the clock. I turned the remaining material into 6 more bottles and put them away, and then I sat down on my coat with my back to the sand and did the thing I should have done in the first 10 minutes. I looked at the map in my head. Properly. All 1,000 meters of it, and there was nothing alive in it. Not a beast, not an insect, not a plant that registered. 1,000 meters of radius in every direction in a place that has weather and terrain and a day and a night, and I was the only living thing in it except for the 3 I had brought with me. I sat there drinking water and staring at an empty map and thought, at the time, that it was because the heat was too extreme for anything to migrate here. That is what I thought. The clock ran down. The portal opened, and I was so relieved that I did not check anything, and it spat me out rolling into the base of a tree, and I sat up rubbing my back and looked at the ground and stopped breathing. 3 flagstones, side by side. One of them worn smooth on top where 100 children had scraped it. I knew that stone. I had scraped that stone. I looked up, and I was standing outside the orphanage where I grew up. Open courtyard gate. The wall with the bad paint. The smell of the place, which is a real smell, dust and laundry and cooking oil, and my thoughts arrived in this exact order, which I have gone over a lot. First thought, I am home. Second thought, I pinched my thigh hard enough to bruise, and it hurt. Third thought, and this is the one that saved my life, came from behind me, where there was a splashing sound because Viney was still swimming in a shell of cold water in a courtyard in the country I was born in. I looked at my own hands. Sleeves, sunburn line, backpack, pet satchel. All the equipment of another world, on a woman standing on a stone she scraped at 11, and I did not feel hot. Viney had just told me it was too hot to come out, and I could not feel the sun at all, and when I stepped forward, the skin on the back of my hand was red in a way that skin does not go in a courtyard in the shade. I was still in the desert. I had never left, and the desert had never been a desert. Then the gate opened, and the director came out. She had the red thermos. She had the handbag. She had the hem of that coat that had been faded since I was 14, and she said, "Xiaona, why did you suddenly come back to see me?" And she walked over, and she put her hand on my arm, and it was warm, and it was soft, and she asked why I had not called so she could have met me at the airport. The director died 3 years ago. I was abroad. I did not get back for it. She kept talking. She said Jing Jing and the others had not seen me in so long. She said, "Come in and sit down." She had her hand on my arm the entire time, and the gate was standing open behind her, and every single thing about her was correct. The tone, the fussing, the way she started a sentence twice. I stood there and looked at her and did not say anything at all. Because that is what the thing does. It goes into your head, it finds the single scene you would give the most for, and it builds it, and then it opens a door and waits. I had thought, when I opened my eyes on those flagstones, I wish she would come out. So it made her come out. I took the 100-day mugwort out of my pack, 60 years of a plant given to me by a fish as food, packed in mud by something with no hands. Legend says it guards the habitat of the Ares clan. Each segment is 10 years. It wards off beasts and sees through illusions. I did not know how to use it. I just held it, and the top segment began to burn away. Not fire. It went to smoke at the speed a snail moves, and the smoke drifted, and where it touched the world came apart. It went across her first. It put a hole through her, and through the hole was orange sky. Then the whole scroll of it tore, the courtyard, the wall, the gate, my entire childhood peeling off in strips, and underneath there was no desert either. Cracked ground, gray, no dunes anywhere, bones. Weathered ones and fresh ones, half-rotted bodies of beasts piled where they had fallen, and the smell hit me all at once because the illusion had been holding that back too. And every bone on that plain was arranged in a rough circle around one tree in the middle, with branches shaped like a deer's tail. The screen had told me. I went back and read it afterward, and it was there the whole time. Dry climate, extremely low humidity. It had never once mentioned a sandstorm, and I had spent 5 hours watching sand blow. The heat was real. The sun was real. The only reason I was not dead of dehydration was that I had spent 5 hours carefully protecting myself from a sun I could not feel, in the shade of a dune that did not exist, because that is the kind of person the last month had made me. The map in my head finally gave me a label. Alien plant. Viney came out of the water shell and put itself between me and that tree, and it was already shaking. I had maybe 4 segments of mugwort left, and while it burned I could see, and when it stopped burning the illusion would come back, and I would go and stand in front of that tree with my arms out and my dead director's hand on my elbow. So we fought it. Everything I had done for a month went into the next 4 minutes. First, the bow and a yellow swan feather arrow with the venom of an entire white-spined sea serpent on the head. The tree felt it coming and whipped its branches to break it out of the air, and Viney went in low and pinned those branches to the ground, because branches are finite and Viney is not. It splits until the job is done. The arrow went into the fletching, and the venom went into the veins. Then the roots came up out of the ground and put Viney under them, and it started draining energy out of my plant like a straw in a glass. Second, 2 more arrows into the root mass, one loaded with a spider venom sac and one with fire ant acid, because I had been collecting poison for a month the way other people collect receipts. Third, the dandan fruit. Liu Wei had given me 3 of them weeks earlier as a joke, because dandan fruit are hollow and they detonate, and because I had once mentioned that Viney's little parasitic fruit needed a delivery system. I told Viney to keep its branches off the far side. Then I ran in close and threw all 3. The first one cracked the bark. The second and third went into the crack, and the parasites went in with them, and they rooted inside that thing's trunk and started opening. It knew immediately. It stopped eating Viney, left the roots tangled, and sent every free branch at me. I got the first one on the A-grade dagger. The armor took the second and third, fire scale crocodile, which is why I still have a torso. But it split into two groups and went high and low at the same time, and I am one person with one knife. The low one went through my left calf, straight through and out, and it took a piece with it. I went down on one knee in a way that I felt in my teeth. Cold sweat everywhere, instantly. Viney overdrew. I felt it happen through the contract, this thing choosing to spend levels it did not have, doubling its branches, splitting past its own limit to get to me. And the tree, which was now split nearly in two by parasites and poison and had approximately 9 seconds left, made a decision I understood completely. It gave up on winning and decided to take me with it. The branch that had my legs slammed me into the ground. My forehead hit the skull of something that had died there years ago. Blood went into my eyes and the world turned red, and then it lifted that branch to come straight down on the top of my head. And Pippin came out of the satchel. I need to explain Pippin, finally, properly. Pippin's innate talent is imitation. It can take the shape and the aura of any beast it has personally seen, and it gets exactly none of the abilities. It is a costume, that is all it is. The largest thing Pippin had ever seen was an elite horned viper in a den under a mountain. So a rabbit the size of a loaf of bread turned into an elite predator with no elite anything and threw itself into a branch that was falling on my skull. It did not stop it. It moved it about 20 centimeters. The branch went past my head and opened my neck instead, and drove me into the dirt, and the red world went black. The tree died. It ran out of trunk and it stopped, and it dropped 2 silver chests, 4 measures of sap, and a bead that the system called a dream bead, and nobody picked any of it up. I was face down, bleeding out of my neck onto a plain full of bones. Coming back was worse than going out. I want to say that clearly, because in stories people wake up. I did not wake up. I lay there with my ears ringing and my fingers moving, and worked my way back into a body that was very obviously in the process of failing. The neck was the bad one. Everything else was pain. The neck was a leak. I got a hemostatic bottle out of the front pocket by feel. Nutter held it. I bit the cap off, tipped my head, and poured the whole thing in. The cuts closed. The neck slowed. The neck did not stop. And lying there, I finally understood the thing Qin Shu had been trying to tell me in a warehouse full of cauldrons 3 days earlier. That bottle was made on an alchemy table, out of a whole plant, at 60% strength, by a woman who thought she was being efficient. If it had been made properly, I would have been standing up. The screen picked that moment to congratulate me. Mist Destroyer. Survived. First in every region of the whole country. Because I had not just survived that map. Killing the tree had killed the map. Its core was gone. It was collapsing. 10 minutes to gather your belongings. And then it asked if I wanted this announced server-wide, and I could not lift my hand, and I could not focus on the words, and 10 seconds later, it made the choice for me, at random. So while I was bleeding into gray dirt with my vision going out, my name went up on the world channel of every region in the country on a 1-minute loop. I have been told it was very impressive. Here is what I actually did with my last clear minute, and it is the decision the rest of this depends on. I told Viney to eat the tree. Viney had overdrawn so hard it was about to drop a whole tier, from high-level mutant plant down to mid, and there was an elite corpse on the ground in front of it, and 10 minutes before the map collapsed and dumped us into open ocean, where a dying human, 2 exhausted juveniles, and a downgraded vine would all drown together within the hour. It hesitated. It came over and traced a branch along my body instead, because it could feel me going, and it did not understand. I told it again. It ate. All of it, in under 10 minutes, an elite plant swallowed whole without chewing because there was no time to enjoy it. And it worked. Its branches went gold again. The sunburn came out of them. It stopped feeling the heat, and under the gold there were fine red threads running like something breathing. 1 step from elite. That is where it landed. And then I felt the contract turn over. That is a specific sensation, and I hope you never have it. The line between us, which had always run one way, tilted. Viney flexed against it experimentally, the way you would test a door you thought was locked, and found it open. It had spent a month being told what to do by a woman weaker than it in every way except one. And that one had just stopped being true. I lay in the dirt with a hole in my neck and did the only thing available, which was talk fast. I said, "Viney, why did you let go? We are about to be teleported into the sea. Hold on, or you will be swept away." Viney hates seawater more than anything in the world. It forgot the entire realization instantly and tied itself to my arm with 3 loops. That is the whole trick. That is the only trick I had left. Do not let it finish the thought. Do not let it ever ask me for something and feel me obey. I had about 11 working brain cells, and I spent all of them on that. And then the map collapsed and threw us into a rainstorm at sea, and salt water went into an open neck wound, and I found out what that expression actually means. I had a teleportation stone and one decision left. Starlight Auction House was 9 hours away by boat, and a magician who wanted me blamed for his auction was standing in it. My shelter was safe and had a bed and no medicine and nobody in it. Chin-Su had a cauldron, a warehouse, and had told me 3 days earlier that flying home in the dark is dangerous, which meant that at this hour she would be on Luo Weng Island. If she was there, I lived. If she was not there, that was the answer to a question I had not asked. I keyed the coordinates with fingers I could not feel. Before the last digit, I looked at Viney and told it that it had to carry me to Chin-Su. That was not an order anymore. There was no contract behind it. It was a woman asking a plant for a favor. Then I pressed the last number and the channel took us, and one jolt broke my forehead open again, and I went out. I am told what happened next by 3 witnesses, one of whom cheats at cards. Viney rolled me up and went inland. Ku-Yi Vine came out of the sand and blocked it, and Viney put a red-veined branch straight into the ground, pulled the buried ones up, and crushed them, because a rootless vine's talent is the best in its category, and Ku-Yi Vines is turning things into straw. But that island belongs to Ku-Yi Vine, and its branches are under all of it, and for every one Viney broke, another came up. Half-faced Bean came back from the sea and joined in. Viney scattered parasitic fruit behind it as it ran, and both of them got infested, and Half-faced Bean cut off its own arm and kept coming with the vine under the other one. Then the ground ahead lit up and cut Viney in half. Gujing Grass, Elite. Innate talent, Hidden Imitation, which means it is a small, unremarkable plant right up until it is not, and it had been lying in the grass with no aura at all. I rolled out of the broken branches. Viney caught me again with new ones, and that is where it stopped being a chase, because 3 plants had it surrounded, one of them elite, and it was carrying a woman who weighed more than it did. Pippin made the call. Nutter dragged Pippin out of my pocket, and both of them jumped down into the mud, and Pippin used its talent again, and this time it did not pick the horned viper. It picked the fastest thing it had ever seen, a double-pupiled black panther, and got the aura and the shape and the legs and none of the power. It picked up my backpack in its mouth. Nutter got onto its back and grabbed fur. Vinny wrapped me onto that panther with several turns of branch and broke the branch off at the base, and then it turned around and threw itself at the elite to clear a lane. And a rabbit that weighs 1 kilogram in its real body ran a full-grown human across an island through underground ambushes. With a 3-tailed squirrel on its neck, listening to the rain, calling out which patch of ground to dodge. Nutter's talent is hearing. It had never once used it on purpose before. They dodged dozens. Pippin slipped near the end and almost put all 3 of us down a slope. Its time ran out about 400 meters from the workshop, and it kept running anyway on a countdown. And when it finally lost the shape, it fell over on top of me and did not get up. Chin-Su was writing up the day's alchemy notes when she heard something outside that was not the usual noise of the island. She looked at the rain and decided not to go out. She actually decided not to go out. Some beast from an outer island, she thought. It will be eaten shortly. Then the wind changed, and she smelled blood, and it was not beast blood. She threw the cauldron out the window and followed the smell 400 meters, and found a human face down in the mud, with a squirrel trying to drag her by the collar, and a small orange rabbit unconscious beside her, and Ku-Yi Vine's branches already coming up through the grass around all 3. She smashed those branches to pulp with a cooking pot. She got me and both animals into the cauldron, and flew back and put me on a tatami mat, and cut my clothes off with scissors and disinfected everything, and she also drank a translation potion, because Nutter would not stop pulling at her sleeve and pointing out the window. Viney is still out there. She went back out into the rain for a plant she had met twice, smashed 3 alien plants off it with a cauldron, grabbed the shredded thing by the middle, threw it in the pot, and told it she had found me. Then she went to work on the actual problem. 2 pieces of a blood-red herb under my tongue to keep me breathing. Then a mystic drug she had to refine from scratch, rare ingredients, difficult method, and she fed it to me a spoonful at a time and watched my limbs close up. It worked on the outside. Every cut sealed. The leg and the neck stayed open, and when she pushed her senses inward to check the organs, everything was getting worse instead of better. There was something wrapped around the inside of me that would not let medicine take. She pulled her hand back, took out a stack of message slips, wrote one, and addressed it to the Lick-Winged People clan, recipient Zhou Kai. The words turned to starlight and went. Zhou Kai was asleep in a treehouse and came out of bed sideways. He did not stop to ask how his student had ended up on Luo Wang Island. He took a wooden token, wrote one line, and went out the window at a run into the deep part of the clan grounds looking for the chief. He found Lin Dong lying under a grove of trees talking to them, out loud, individually, scolding one for dropping 23 leaves in a day, telling another one it should be ashamed of its fruit yield, warning a third that he had noticed it moving its roots away from the cold pool and it should stop. Those are viney trees. The clan's whole economy is their fruit, and the yield has been falling for years, and the chief's strategy was talking to them every day about their attitude. Zhou Kai picked him up off the grass by the collar. Here is the negotiation, and it is my favorite thing in this entire story. Zhou Kai did not tell the chief that a player was dying. He told the chief that the Kui tree's youngling was dying. Because the Kui tree is the tree in my back garden, the one that grew out of a bone meadow, the one that refuses to be sheltered. It is theirs. It left or was taken a very long time ago, and the entire clan has been looking for it. And Lin Dong had been spending his evenings telling underperforming trees that their cousin was out there somewhere. And Zhou Kai asked him, if that youngling is gone, do you think the Kui tree comes home? Lin Dong cut his own palm open and dripped blood in the cold pool. That pool grows a herb called Riji grass. One leaf takes so long to mature that clan chiefs have delayed their own retirement waiting for one, because chiefs are the only ones who eat it. Because it raises spiritual strength. Lin Dong activated the pool and then ran off to get the notes on alien plant curses, and left Zhou Kai standing alone at the water. Zhou Kai talked to the pool, explained the whole situation. Got no reaction. So he changed tack and started emphasizing repeatedly that the Kui tree would die with her. And a leaf came off the herb in the middle of the pool, floated down, and swam over to him. He picked it up, bowed, put it in his bag, took the notes off the chief when he came back, and teleported out before anyone could inventory anything. Meanwhile, Chin Su had found the mark. She had been changing my clothes because hers do not fit me, and she had dug out a coat, and when she lifted my shoulder, she saw a pale yellow circle on my back with a totem inside it. She copied it onto paper and remembered where she had seen that style before. In a clan journal, in the section about alien plants, in a chapter that was a warning. So when Zhou Kai came through the window, the two of them had the whole thing between them in about 4 minutes, and it went like this. An alien plant lays a death curse on whoever kills it. The higher the level, the deeper the curse. But it can only land on the killer. I did not kill the Taoba tree. That was its name, and Zhou Kai said it the way you say the name of a war. Vini killed it. I assisted. So the curse went on to Vini, where it should have stayed harmlessly, because plants eat each other constantly, and a curse from something weaker than you is nothing. And then the contract flipped, and when the stronger party in a contract is carrying a curse, and the weaker party is a human whose spirit cannot resist anything, the curse simply relocates to the softest available surface. Vini had not done it on purpose. Vini did not know it had happened. Vini had carried me across an island and lost half its branches doing it. Zhou Kop lie on it anyway. His argument was simple, and I cannot honestly say it was wrong. Reduce the vine to its old level, the curse reverses. And more than that, look at it. Look at what it is now. Whatever happens to the curse, that plant cannot stay at that strength beside a human with spirit 40, and if she wakes up next to it, she becomes a puppet eventually. And remember what the Aries clan looked like when the Taoba tree finished with them. Chin Su put herself in front of him and pushed him back down on the bed. Her counter-argument was better. If Vini had wanted control, it had already had it. It had held the stronger end of that contract on a plane of bones, with a dying woman in front of it and every option available. And what it had done with that was carry her 400 meters through 3 predators to the one person who could help. She also pointed out that Zhou Kai was proposing to solve the problem by removing the only thing that could suppress it. The curse of a Daoba tree can be held down by the thing that killed the Daoba tree, and by essentially nothing else. Swap in an elite plant from elsewhere, and you get worse results. So the answer was not to cut Vini down. The answer was the contract itself. Break it and rebuild it as an equal one. Neither side commands. Neither side can be commanded. Strength stops mattering because control is no longer a property of the relationship. Chin-Su turned around and called Vini over. Nutter has never let me forget how this negotiation went. She said, "It is really good that you brought Li Na to see me." Vini preened. She said, "Look at her. She has stopped bleeding, but she has not woken up. And I have thought about it, and only you can wake her." Vini paid attention. She said, "To wake her, you have to change your connection with her. Are you willing?" Vini did not understand a single word of the previous 10 minutes of clinical discussion. What it understood was that changing something would wake me up. It hesitated for about 4 seconds and nodded. Chin-Su had prepared arguments. She did not need any of them. Nutter, who is the only one in that room who tracked the entire conversation, has informed me that it knew Vini was easy, but did not know it was that easy. Then the hard part. Vini had to sever the connection itself, because in an unequal contract, only the strong side can break it. It understood that part immediately, and did not want to. Losing contact means losing contact. It lifted a branch to refuse, and Chin-Su caught the branch and put it back down on me and said, "Temporary. Look at this stone. It looks like the one she used on you. I can reconnect it. Do you trust me?" And Vini thought about it. And what it thought about, and I know this because I could hear everything, was that at this time of day I would normally be feeding all 3 of them, and it was late, and I had not eaten. Then it slid a branch into the wound in my neck, followed the contract down to my heart, and cut it. I felt that from inside. I was not unconscious. I was in a room I could not open. I had come back somewhere in the teleport channel and never surfaced. I could hear all of it. Chin-Su questioning Nutter, Joe Kai arriving, the knife, the argument about whether my plant should be killed in front of me. And then I felt the one line that connected me to Vini thinning out and going. I could not stop it. I could not shout. I banged on the walls of a cage made out of my own body while people who were saving my life discussed me in the third person. Then Joe Kai put a leaf that clan chiefs wait years for into my mouth, and a spiritual force came into me from outside like someone opening a window in a sealed room. Chin-Su lifted my shoulders. Joe Kai took the dagger and cut along the lines of the totem on my back, following the pattern exactly, and blood came, and as the carved lines closed, he cut Vini's branch and pressed golden sap into the open skin. Then the red contract stone and my aura and Vini's mixed, and the stone melted out of his hand like ice. The pale yellow Taoba tree totem was pushed out by a gold one. The gold one spread across my whole body. My heartbeat came back up to a normal rhythm, and Vini, in its enthusiasm, covered my shoulders and my neck and most of my face before Chin-Su told it that was more than enough. Vini said, and I have this on record, that it forgot. Then it said it wanted to play cards. Inside my head, the door came off the cage, and I crawled out, and I opened my eyes to 3 faces, and 2 of them were furry. Pippin's eyes went round, and it shoved its whole head into my cheek. I got a hand out from under the blanket and touched all 3 of them, and the first thing I thought, before the pain, before the questions, was a list. Vini, Pippin, Nutter, Chin-Su, Joe Kai. 100-day mugwort a fish gave me as a snack. Enough poison to fill a jar, collected out of habit. A shelf of bad potions I had made myself, and one good one I had learned to make 3 days ago. Sunscreen. Take out any single item on that list, and I stay on that plane of bones with the other skeletons. It is good to be alive. That is the entire thought I had. I have had more sophisticated ones since, and none of them have been as true. Chin-Su got to me before Joe Kai did, sat down on the bed, and asked how I felt. Joe Kai leaned over her shoulder and asked whether I could feel my spirit recovering. I said I felt fine. My body did not hurt. And my spirit felt, if anything, a bit too strong. She said I had scared her to death. She said if she had already been asleep, the animals could have climbed all the way to her cabin, and she would never have known. I said thank you, and that I would have died on the road today without them, and then I told them what had actually happened, and Joe Kai went very still at the words Taoba tree. Every race on the continent had been looking for that thing for a long time. They had turned over islands. It had been hiding inside a fog map in the middle of the sea, which is precisely why nobody could find it. Then Joe Kai asked whether I had brought any of it back with me. I said I had. 2 silver chests, 4 measures of sap, and a bead. He explained. Before the Ares clan were wiped out, their last leader posted a bounty. All races, unlimited, unite and destroy the Tao Ba tree. The races were still arguing about how to get into the illusion to reach a clan that lived under the sea when the Tao Ba tree finished the job and left. And a bounty stays on the board forever unless the poster takes it down. There is nobody left to take it down. So somewhere, in a clan archive under generations of paperwork, there is a reward with no expiry date posted by a dead civilization for a job that a 22-year-old and a stupid vine finished by accident in a desert that was not a desert. He said he would go and dig for it. He did not promise me a number, and I did not ask for one, because I have learned to be careful about what I say out loud in that world. Then, Chin-Su noticed the mugwort in my hand. She got very close to it and sniffed it and asked where I got it, and when I said a friend from the sea gave it to me as food, she made a noise. Because 100-day mugwort grows from the flesh and blood of dead Ares clan, it cannot live outside the seabed. She had seen exactly one in her life, dried out in a magician's collection, and she had paid for the privilege in mystic drugs. Mine was alive because whatever packed that root ball in star mud knew exactly what it was doing. She sat there with it and said, quietly, that even after death, the Ares clan carry the mark of that tree. That dying inside an illusion is what makes the herb that breaks illusions. She called it an obsession, and she pointed out, since I had not put it together, that the plant born from the bodies of the clan the Tao Ba tree destroyed was the reason the Tao Ba tree is now dead. It took them 10,000 years and a girl in a sun hat, but they got there. I broke off a segment and gave it to her, and packed the root end in star mud so it would live, and she held it in both hands and could not stop smiling, and said she would keep it on her workbench because it cannot be grown with the others. Then I gave Joe Kai the last sunflower fruit off the Kwei Kwei tree for his chief, and told him the tree has 17 fruit coming. 17. Their pampered grove behind the cold pool produces under 10, with a protective barrier over it and a chief personally negotiating with it every evening. Joe Kai asked why I had not moved mine somewhere safe when the lightning hit it. I told him I had, and it dropped everything, and I had to put it back out in the storms. He sat with that for a while. Then he said he was going to go home and proposed taking the barrier off the grove. He also took the fruit specifically so that his chief would be too happy to ask questions about a missing leaf, which is the most political thing I have ever watched a man do. It worked for about 90 seconds before Lindong met him at the teleport point holding a switch. I checked my own numbers under the blanket that night, with Chin-Su asleep on the other side of the bed and 3 of them piled against my head. Spirit 40 to 45. Strength up 2. 1 leaf. 5 points of spirit is 7 achievements worth, and clan chiefs postpone their retirements over these. And with the 2 attribute points from Mist Destroyer, I put both in strength, because with an equal contract, it does not matter how strong Viney gets anymore. It cannot take me. That door is welded shut in both directions. I went to sleep in a borrowed shirt with a scar on my neck and everything I owned in a bag. In the morning, a new achievement was waiting. Escape from death. Survive more than 12 hours after your life value reaches 0 and recover it in full. Life value reaches 0. That is the wording. I had been dead in the system's opinion, and it had spent the night with my personal page flickering gray and white in front of 40 players locked in a building at sea. Zhou Yang watched my page go gray and come back, and go gray again for an hour. She said, out loud, that I seemed to be and could not finish the sentence. Liu Wei asked if her screen was broken. Xiao Ru tapped it and got player has died, player has died, player has died. The room split. My region went quiet. Some players from elsewhere got visibly excited. Feng Hua looked around at the excited ones and thought, if somebody at her level cannot survive this, what happens to the rest of us? And Gao Ming, who had spent 2 days waiting for news of my death so he could hand the Lick-Winged People clan an explanation and get on with blaming me for his auction, discovered that he was going to have to do it in front of me. Then Zhou Yang lifted her head and asked, loudly, "Who exactly said Li Na was gone?" I came back the next morning in a borrowed shirt and a pair of feathered black trousers that Qin Su says belonged to somebody named Shu Cheng, who took so many of her things that a pair of trousers is a rounding error. I could hear the shouting from outside the door. I pushed it open and said, "What are you saying? You are so loud I can hear you from the beach." The room stopped. I walked in through the middle of 40 people, arms crossed, and hooked the door shut behind me with my heel, and everybody in that building, except my own region and Gao Ming, had spent the night certain I was dead. The first person to speak was Bai Jun, who said, "Li Na, why have you gotten so dark?" "I have been to hell and back, and the first review is a tan." I said, "It is not dark, it is wheat-colored, and it looks much healthier, thank you." Then my own crowd came at me, and Zhou Yang got there first, and as her hand came up to slap my shoulder, Viney came out of my sleeve and hit it out of the air. Zhou Yang has traded with beasts. She has seen an alien plant before, at a distance. What she looked at now was a gold branch with blood-red veins in it, locking onto her with the aura of a thing that is one step from elite, and she went backward 2 steps, with her whole face gone white. I got Viney wrapped around my wrist and apologized and explained that it was stressed, which was true. Anything that came near me fast for about a week got that treatment. Then Zhou Yang asked whether this was a new alien plant I had contracted, and Viney tried to attack her again. There is no new alien plant. There is only Viney. I had to say that out loud, twice. Xiao Ru and Liu Wei, who both have contracted beasts, could feel what the others could not, which is that my spirit had gone somewhere it had no business being, and they could see the white scar across my neck, wide, obvious, above a borrowed collar. Gao Ming did the whole thing from the middle of the room without moving. He looked at the branch on my wrist and started reasoning out loud. There are alien plants in that map, not low-level ones. High-level mutant plant, no. If it were only that the rootless vine could have handled it, and there would be no damage, and Qin Su would not have sent me a message threatening to skin me. Elite alien plant. You met an elite alien plant. Then he asked which one, because there are only a handful on the entire continent. I told him it was none of his business, and asked whether he was disappointed that I had not died, and we were off. He said I got unlucky and fell in, and had the nerve to blame him. I said if he had not spent 2 days screaming at me to come back immediately, I would have sailed in at 5 in the afternoon like a normal person, on the autopilot that he sold me. He said my brain had been rearranged by an elite plant. I said if he wanted to discuss mental health, there was a whole clan of alchemists available, and he should book an appointment instead of running an auction. This went on for over 10 minutes, and I was enjoying myself enormously. Then he tried to get the room on his side. He turned around and asked the other players whether they were really going to let Li Na argue with him instead of getting on with the discussion of their pay. 40 players looked at him with the flat expression of people who have done the math. They could not touch a magician. They could absolutely touch each other. And Wen Jie, who had spent a week making my life a hobby, was now standing at the back, pressed against the long-haired man trying to be furniture, because he had seen what was on my arm, and worked out that outside this building there is no rule about fighting. Nobody helped Gao Ming. Not one person. So he took out a wooden token, scratched something on it, tore it off, and told me that compensation would require approval from a magister, and that I would simply have to wait. Which is the oldest move in the world. Approval takes as long as the approver wants. The auction ends in 3 days, everyone goes home, and the claim evaporates. I shrugged and said fine, I would ask Zhou Kai to expedite it. Gao Ming's face did something complicated. Then he took a breath and asked me to produce the items I had acquired from Luowang Island. Every player in that room looked at me with pity, because he had already rejected all of theirs and sent them back out to buy again. I spread my hands and said, "The auction items." Qin Su says you produce 3 times the coins on the purchase order first, and then I hand them over. Gao Ming stared at me like I had suggested he eat the table. So I put the acquisition order down in front of him and explained that Qin Su had discussed it with him last night. No, not discussed. Informed. I was only carrying the message. And I watched him remember the token he had received in the middle of the night. Then I gave him the rest of it, and this is the part that broke him. Apart from the items on this one order, Qin Su is not selling any herbs or any mystic drugs at this auction. And for future auctions, magicians of magister rank or above may come to Luo Wang Island in person to ask, and she will decide. Gao Ming leaned against the table. Then he heard the second half properly and came off it fast, both hands on his cane. Not selling. You are saying Qin Su is not selling anything except what is on that list. I said yes. Take it up with her. His hand shook. His face went the color of paper. Because Starlight Auction House exists to sell the finest things on this continent. And of all the alchemists in the Wu Xian clan, there is exactly one still researching new mystic drugs. He had just found out she was closed for business. And the reason she was closed was a form he had underpriced himself to make his margins look good. He shouted at me to produce the documents. I said, coins first. And that is when a voice came from the roof beam. Gao Ming, Great Magister Fan Bo is looking for you. Nobody had noticed her come in. She had been standing on a crossbeam above 40 people for most of the argument, and she threw a communication device onto the table, and Gao Ming snatched it and went out the door, and we all listened to a magician saying, yes sir, through a wall. Liu Wei sidled over and asked me quietly why Gao Ming had come apart at the words not selling. I told him. One alchemist left doing research. He stops the new mystic drugs. The auction has nothing anybody actually wants, and every other race stops bothering to attend. Xiao Ru said that before I arrived, Gao Ming had been telling them their pay was cancelled, and they had to go back to those races and try again, and that if I had not come back, they would have gone along with it. I looked at the branch on my wrist and said the only thing worth saying about the whole affair. You get what you pay for. Up on the crossbeam, the woman who had been pretending to nap opened her eyes and looked down at me. Gao Ming came back in gray. She teleported off the beam and landed in front of him, tapped her cane, and addressed the room. Yedzi, Great Magician, taking over as Chief Auction Appraiser of Starlight Auction House, effective immediately. Gao Ming leaned in and asked her, through his teeth, whether she had done this on purpose. She said that if he had not fallen for it, all her digging would have been wasted. She had come 3 days earlier offering to help. He had refused, formally, in front of the record, and told her he would report to the Great Magister himself, which is exactly what she needed him to do, because it made every problem in that building his alone. She had told him not to try to take the appraiser's post from her. He made the mess himself. Then she brushed his collar with her free hand and told him that the thing Great Magister Fan Bo hates most is anybody making Starlight Auction House look cheap, and to go and accept his punishment, Great Magician Gao Ming. He tried, at the door, to say that every auction has always been run by 2 magicians. She scoffed and led all of us into another room and shut the door in his face, and told him on the way through that a piece of trash who had cost the auction house that much was not in a position to negotiate. He was left standing alone in the middle of an empty room. Yedzi sat down at a round table, and I walked straight to the seat directly opposite her and took it because I have learned where to sit. The first thing she did was pay everyone. Full 800 per person, regardless of quality, because Gao Ming had promised it, and because under auction house rules, he personally eats half of that bill. The second thing she did was ask to see the goods. 40 players emptied their bags onto that table, and I watched a great magician nearly have a medical event. A ribbon bird plume with 1 feather left in the quill. Herbs with the roots gone and the leaves dried to paper. Artemisia with every medicinal leaf stripped off it. Not one item on that table would have made it into a village market, let alone an auction, and every race on the continent had handed it over with a straight face. She looked at it, and she thought about the sentence she had overheard through a wall, and she understood the entire situation in about 4 seconds. Then she asked where mine were. I did not look up from the herbs I was flipping through. I said, Qin Shu requires 3 times the listed amount. Give me the coins, and I will hand them over. She asked if I knew how much that was. I said, 27,000. Then I corrected myself, because it matters. 27,290. She started to say something disapproving, and I took out the acquisition order Qin Shu had given me, the one from the year before last, and Viney came out of my sleeve and slammed it flat on the table in front of her. I said, if you want to ruin the reputation of Starlight Auction House, keep using acquisitions like this one. If you want to keep receiving quality like what is on this table, keep cutting the price. Then I told her that both of those sentences were Qin Su's, addressed to Gao Ming, and since he was not present, I assumed it was fine to deliver them to her. Jade picked up that order. 2 lines of text. She read it for 5 full minutes. Nobody in that room said a word for 5 minutes. Then she said, "I see." She rolled it up, put it in her bag, closed her eyes, sighed, and waved her cane, and 2 stacks of luo coins appeared on the table in front of me. 27,290. Please check the count. 40 players forgot to breathe. I have never seen that much money in either world in one place. I looked at it for a second and thought, quietly, that the pile I took out of the horned viper den had been slightly taller than this one, which meant I had been carrying about 30,000 in stolen coins around in a backpack for weeks without knowing what it was. I put it all away. Every coin of it goes to Chin Su when the auction opens, as much of it as she will take, and she is going to argue with me about that, and she is going to lose. Then I handed over the goods. The watered mystic drug, the badly stored zhimu grass. Jade held a bottle up to the light, saw that it was essentially water, and I watched a woman decide to have a conversation with Great Magister Fan Bo about Gao Ming at the earliest opportunity. She paid 3 times list for garbage and knew exactly why, and she took it, because the alternative was a continent that has decided the Starlight Auction House is cheap. She told us, afterward, that she would be going to Luo Weng Island personally to apologize. Then, new orders came out. She had drafted them days earlier with a colleague, based on the actual prices of previous auctions, while Gao Ming was still congratulating himself. Same 800 pay. Same commission on savings. Room to negotiate up to 5% over list because these are real relationships and not a shopping list. Everybody got one. Mine did not come with the others. I said, "So I am supposed to go home." She shook her head, pulled a separate form out of her bag, and slid it across. Dulu Island, Horned Viper Clan. 10 sea ginger coins for 1,200. 20 Nidium Monieri for 2,450. Contact not yet established. My whole region started talking at once. Zhou Yang said Horned Viper Clan. Seriously, you have a bounty on you from them. Lu Wei said they will tear her into pieces, and that will be the least of it. Xiao Wenxin said 800 coins is not worth this. He Xuan asked whether they had requested this specifically so they could collect the bounty in-house. Jade, who had clearly been warned about my mouth, got in first and said that she knew about the bounty, that this was not targeting me, and that after questioning a lick-winged people warrior named Zhou Kai last night, he had suggested it. I raised a hand and told her it was fine, and that I would take it, because I know exactly what Zhou Kai saw in that cabin. He saw the level of the thing on my arm. He is the man who tried to knife it and lost the argument, and having lost it, he made a note. And this is a man who once spent an entire archery lesson trying to talk me into digging around the bottom of a snake den for treasure. Sending me back to a race that has already lost a war to me, with a plant that is now considerably worse than the plant that beat them, is not a punishment. That is Zhou Kai's idea of a gift. I looked at the order and stroked Vinny's branch and said, "Vinny, are you happy? We are going back to visit them." Vinny wound 3 turns around my wrist, which is how it cheers. Go back and see old friends. Jade noticed that I had not stopped smiling since I read the form, and thought about what Zhou Kai had told her when she asked whether I might turn on her over this. Do not worry about Li Na taking that order badly. She has probably been itching to go back to the Horned Viper Clan. She wrapped up the meeting. 3 days, 6-hour admission window. Do not be late. I asked for a translation potion because I do not speak Horned Viper, and it is going to be hard to negotiate a price with a race whose language sounds like a kettle. She said no, because 1 bottle costs more than my entire fee, and the auction house does not do business at a loss. Then she took out a small white box with 2 things in it shaped like butterfly wings, and explained that the magicians had made something new. 3 hours of use out of every 24, 1-to-1 only, and you hand the matching wing to whoever you need to talk to. I asked if I could buy a pair instead of borrowing. She said no, they do not make many, and they will be available for purchase when the auction opens, which is the single most magician sentence I have ever heard. I said, okay. Then we all went out onto the sand, and the rain had finally stopped after 9 days, and the sky was still gray, and 40 players started launching boats. I borrowed a waterproof frame from Xiao Ru on the way out, because I have thought about the last time I went into a horned viper den, and the problem was never getting in. The cloak solves getting in. The problem is that a backpack has 32 slots no matter how deep each one goes. And last time I left things behind because I ran out of categories. Xiao Ru asked what I wanted it for, and I said, it works, and she gave me her pet swimming pool on the condition that I bring it back. 4 hours out from Dulu Island, I sat down in the cabin and did the only genuinely relaxing thing available, which is opening boxes. 8 iron chests and 4 silver ones, saved up for weeks, because I have enough food and clothes now, and what I need is materials. The iron ones were thin. Water, bread, jerky, rice, pistachios, rock sugar, heat stroke medicine, a raincoat, a shirt, 1 pea seed, disinfectant tablets, some fiber, and an engine. I got the sled blueprint out so fast I nearly went over the side. 15 iron blocks, 10 aluminum, 10 wood, 30 nails, 6 rubber, 4 plastic, 4 leather, 1 engine, and I had spent an entire cold snap collecting all of it against a day that had not come yet. I built it on the deck. Orange-red, 1 seat, long skids at the front, and tracks at the back. And it is not a cargo sled, it is a personal one, and the blueprint's own description admits it will not keep you warm and simply promises you will get out the door. I rode it in circles on the deck of a moving boat, with 2 animals on my shoulder and a vine around my wrist, and that is a thing I did. Then the silver chests. An intermediate lick-winged people archery scroll, which came out of the side looking like it had been in an attic for 40 years, and which I dusted off carefully because I know who is inside these things now. A whole house waterproofing blueprint, which after 9 days of rain I would have paid actual money for. A second pet satchel, which is for Vinny, because Vinny has been complaining about the arrangement. And a contract stone. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at it for a while, with Vinny and Nutter and Pippin playing cards on the blanket. Badly. Vinny cheats by growing extra branches and thinks nobody has noticed. Pippin had a card in its beak and was running laps. I picked it up by the scruff and told it we were pausing the game. Because here is the thing I have never fixed. Nutter is contracted, since the day it refused to go home. Vinny is contracted twice over now, once badly and once properly. And Pippin has never been contracted, because I have never had a spare stone. The one that fell out of a tree on day 1 and let a stranger pick it up. The one with no useful abilities at all. The one that turned into a predator it had seen once in its life and threw itself into a branch coming down on my skull. Spit out the card, I said. We will play after this. It looked at Nutter. It looked at Vinny. It made a series of very urgent noises about needing to get back to its battle. Contract this high-level beast, juvenile stage. Yes. Contract successful. And a voice arrived in my head, brand new, chattering over itself in a hurry to say everything at once. And the first thing I ever heard Pippin say was that Vinny had 4 extra cards under the blanket. We are 4 hours from Dulu Island. Somewhere in a clan archive, under generations of paperwork, there is a bounty with no expiry date, posted by a dead civilization, waiting for someone to hand over the remains of a tree. And on Dulu Island, there is a race that put a price on my head, who are about to receive a very polite acquisition order, delivered by the 2 of us who took their island apart, and one of us has grown considerably since the last time they saw it. 36 days ago, I woke up in a wasteland in strawberry pajamas with 1 slipper and 4 points of stamina, and the first thing I did was cry about a flatbread. Today, a great magician counted 27,000 coins onto a table in front of me because a woman on an island told her to, and a race that owns an island wants me dead badly enough to put it in writing, and I am sailing toward them on purpose. I have a shopping list, a borrowed swimming pool, and a plant that wants to play cards. Let us go and negotiate.